All right, it's 7 o'clock. We have a lot to important business this evening, so let's get started. Glad to see so many people out tonight. Appreciate it. Hope we can have seats, or if you're at least out in the hallway, you can get a chance to peek in and participate. We were unable to use the library room this evening, so we appreciate everybody's patience with this. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have regular members here tonight, Dave Ryan, Derek Peterson, Vaughn Marecki, Kevin Gray, and myself. Jerry Post is absent, so Ned, you can sit in for Jerry. All right? Good. Approval of minutes, June 16th, regular meeting. Any substantive comments about the minutes? Generally. What's that? All right, so we'll accept the minutes as submitted. Good. We have two public hearings tonight. We'll continue the public hearing that was opened as it relates to the Hartford Simsbury form-based code 2 weeks ago. We left that public hearing open, and we will accept additional comments tonight and decide whether we will close the hearing and possibly take action on that tonight. And we also have two other applications related to the property on Hopmeadow Street, 155, that we'll have both a presentation and public hearing on. So I'd like to begin with the Hartford Simsbury Form-Based Code public hearing and ask if there are any additional comments anyone would like to make tonight. And if so, would you please come forward, use the microphone, state your name and address, and with the interest of time, let's try to keep all of these presentations to 2 or 3 minutes maximum and talk about pertinent points that are not repetitive of what's been said before. As moderator, I will do my best to try to stick to that. All right?
Good evening.
Thank you.
Here's a copy of my name and address. I'm Sharon Lysak. I live at 144 Terrafill Road. I've been here 34 years. I object to the proposed code for the following reasons. The site is a magnificent asset for historic, scenic, civic pride, and quality of life issues. Simsbury is renowned for this beautiful area. The proposed code provides no limit or information as to what % of the land can be developed. 2, grants far-reaching project approval and authorization to a town employee, regardless of his or her excellence, and removes that authority from our elected commissions and boards. That authority has been granted to our commissioners specifically because such matters affecting our town are rightly reviewed by an elected representative group of our citizens, which is the basis of our democratic form of government. 3, the code eliminates public hearings, thus completely negating the citizens' involvement in development in our town. I don't attend many public hearings because I believe the commissioners are all respected professionals with the best interests of the residents at heart, but I do not wish to provide a blanket waiver for the opportunity to be heard. 4, the code minimizes the input and role of the design review and the planning commissions regarding a number of the application types. For example, as stated on page 8 in section D, 5D review bodies, the proposed code states that the design review board's input shall be provided to the planning director, and the planning director shall then make the recommendation to approve or deny a master site development plan. It may be inadequate or incomplete for a town employee to filter the opinions and concerns of residents and relay only that particular employee's opinion of what is relevant to the town's elected representatives and boards, especially on matters of this magnitude. 5, the exemption from a hearing and from submitting a master site development plan for new buildings of 25,000 square feet is too broad, in my opinion, and there is no limit on the number of buildings of that size that can be just given carte blanche approval to go up. 6, I only have two more. Hopmeadow Street is our town's main street, a gathering spot and location of the town hall, police department, post office, and library. The congestion and traffic is already a safety hazard, and adding large development places an undue burden on residents, especially those whose streets feed into Hopmeadow Street, truly interfering with the residents' rights to peaceful and safe enjoyment of our property. It is dangerous to walk across Hopmeadow Street as it is now, never mind with much more added development and traffic. And number 7, the code states that the plan is for human-scaled buildings. I did some research on that. All I could really find out was, for sure, it has nothing to do with the height of the buildings. It only has to do with good factors, of course, but they have to do with the sort of impression a person gets and how things are placed so as not to feel as closed in. And so I applaud that part of it, but it still means, the height is in no way restricted according to the proposed code. And in closing, I've been trying to watch for almost 2 years now, planning and economic development and zoning, and I just don't see where there is a cohesive plan on development that is communicated to residents. There is such a huge effort and focus on what seems to be developing every piece of green space on Hopmeadow Street. And do we or don't we need the tax revenue from development on Hopmeadow Street? In a meeting of the Economic Development Commission, I believe that was the commission I saw, our town officials stated, at this time, we have so much upcoming development in place that the town would be okay if we didn't have the Hartford property. That's almost a direct quote. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that I don't understand what our goal is. And I really appreciate all that you do, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Elaine Groundwater, 16 Trainer Drive, Weetog. Elaine Groundwater. Board member of the Chamber of Commerce, Simsbury Chamber of Commerce. Dear Chairman Pomeroy, the Simsbury Chamber of Commerce is in favor of the new form-based code for the Hartford property. The new code is based on sound research, public input, staff, and commission review. Further, the code provides good, flexible development for the property. It is imperative that the town of Simsbury position themselves to welcome potential developers to review options for the site and to allow Simsbury to remain competitive in this type of market. The Simsbury Chamber of Commerce urges the Zoning Commission to close the public hearing at the end of comment on Monday, July 7th, 2014, and adopt the new code. The Simsbury Chamber of Commerce thanks you in advance for your time and consideration in this matter. Sincerely, Lou George, Chairman, Government Affairs Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nancy?
Nancy Hasse, 1 Stonehenge Drive, and Haase. I was at the last public hearing, and I didn't take the opportunity to speak, so I definitely wanted to make the effort to get here this evening to speak. At our last Board of Selectmen meeting, Hiram Peck gave what I thought was a very concise chronology of the opportunity for the public input into this process and the details of all of the meetings and all of the evaluation that had been done and the partnerships between the Hartford and the town of Simsbury. That partnership has been wonderful. And so I just wanted to thank the Hartford and thank Hiram for that great work. And I'm here also to urge the closing of the public hearing and the passage of these regulations. Some of the comments are very good ones, and I think what we've seen come out of things like, for instance, the Town Center charrette has given us a unique look at that specific parcel, and this does the same thing for the Hartford. So a comment was made by Commissioner Ryan in regards to the extent in which our zoning regulations may be expanded. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. And I think it's not the first, certainly not the first, and it won't be the last time we'll see that. And I think it speaks to the unique village districts that we have in our community and how important it is to study those various areas so that we can come up with comprehensive plans that work specific to those areas in our community. The consent agenda has worked. I think what this will do is give some predictability. It also requires that it has some format, which is not something that's available in the PAD. So I think for that reason, it offers a different level that developers can use, and that assures the town what they will get out of the development in this area. And my reason for urging the closing of the public hearing is because with each day that passes, the Hartford and CBRE loses the opportunity to market this piece of property. It's an extremely competitive environment out there, and I think with that loss of each day, we lose the opportunity to make the most of what we want to have there. And so we've done things like the Route 10 corridor study. We've ensured that DOT would be involved in various steps of processes to ensure that we have good, smooth transition of Route 10. And I think all of those checks and balances will be apparent with the passage of these regulations. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call. All right, thank you. So among the commissioners, we should have a discussion about whether we want to close the public hearing.
Doesn't the state statutes mandate that the public hearing can be open no longer than 35 days?
There is a time limit. I'm not sure what it is.
Unless the applicant were to grant an extension.
Who's the applicant?
It's actually, in this case, it's us
Town of Simsbury.
Well, I don't recall the zoning commission ever asking for this
asking for,
regulation. Did we ever vote to ask for a regulation?
The town
Where
of-
did this come from?
The town of Simsbury.
Staff made this, right? I mean,
there was a series of, over the past year, been a series of discussions about the whole process.
doesn't the zoning commission, we have to have somebody who's applying, okay? The zoning commission, as far as I know, did not ask for this regulation.
I think if you're trying to say if was there a consensus to enter into this,
Asking who's the applicant.
the town is the applicant in this case.
Town of
So we can
Simsbury.
ask,
It's the zoning commission, according to the call.
did we ever, I never, anyway, well, we're here. Sorry.
A lot of work's been done,
I
so I
was
think we need to deal
on
with it.
attack, that's different. Okay, sorry. But we do have to close the public hearing.
Yeah, I think,
believe.
I would, unless someone has a firm objection, then I would entertain a motion
Yeah, I
to
would make a
close.
motion to close the public hearing.
All right, and a second. All right, second by Von Marecki. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. This is where the chairman makes his money, whether we should discuss this now. I think we should. And act on this before we have the public hearing on the other two applications. I think that'd be appropriate. So I need a motion to amend the agenda.
So moved.
In a second? Seconded by Ned Cosgrove. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So we've amended our agenda to discuss this topic. And generally, the next step would be that someone would move approval, or at least, and then we can have some questions and discuss openly a motion. So I guess I would move approval of the Hartford form-based code, as we refer to it, as submitted.
I second it.
Seconded by Derek Peterson. And so now we'll have discussion about that. So
Okay.
David,
Having prepared my
your comments?
questions,
All right.
let me hand it out to everybody. There are a number of questions that I have. I think I have, you need another one?
No, I need one. Thank you.
Okay.
I passed it. Thanks.
This proposal to help the Hartford market its vacant property in the hope that the town will be able to realize approximately $5 million in property taxes has created serious questions in my mind. If this proposed addition to our zoning regs is passed, aren't the most likely outcomes, 1, 40 acres of high-density housing, including affordable housing units on the north parcel, and 2, a demolished building on the south parcel? Is there credible evidence that would lead to the conclusion that adopting this code will encourage buyers to come forth? As far as I know, we've had no interest so far. What support is there to support the idea that development approvals would be faster? Following is a list of 7 issues that have come to mind in considering the document. And at least 2 surveys of Simsbury residents done over the last 10 years by the Board of Selectmen, Simsbury's rural character ranks near the top of town characteristics that the residents value. Why are we considering a proposal to encourage an island of new urbanism on the Hartford site? 2, this proposal would expand our zoning regulations by about 60 pages from 160 plus or minus. This proposal was created by staff, and I don't think the zoning commission has done its due diligence with respect to the scope of the code and the new procedures. 3, form-based zoning is a new concept, and there's little real experience with its unintended effects. Certainly, there are no long-term analysis of benefits and difficulties. It was stated that the form-based code for the center zone would result in a flood of attractive new development proposals. So far, that effect has been limited to an extra cost and long delay for the Redstone Pub in getting a sign permit. In the end, a text amendment was necessary in spite of the proposed flexibility or advertised flexibility. My question is form-based zoning necessary? 4, the proposed code cites as regulatory documents Simsbury Plan of Conservation and Development, Simsbury Design Rule Board's Guidelines for Community Development, and 2 new urbanism walkable community documents that we haven't seen. What it says in the code, as far as I can see, is that the applicant has to show conformance to these documents. That, to me, makes them regulatory. They should not be regulatory. Planning Commission, not staff, is charged by the state statute with assessing the proposal's conformance with the Plan of Conservation and Development. See Section 8-3 of the Connecticut statutes. Town planner reports to the Board of Selectmen. Connecticut statutes prohibit the Board of Selectmen from interfering in land use decisions. The town planner should not be empowered by regulations to make land use decisions such as improving site plans and deciding land uses. 6, subdivisions and streets are the responsibility of the Planning Commission by Connecticut statute. Zoning Commission regs cannot abrogate Planning Commission functions. The role of Design Review Board was limited by the new town charter that took effect January 1st, 2013. This proposal doesn't seem to respect the town charter's reestablishment of the Design Review Board's role. And I've attached the references to these documents for you guys to look at if you want. The planned area development regulations and the existing Simsbury zoning regs permit a developer more latitude than the proposed form-based code. Yet we haven't seen any concrete demand for either planned area development or the form-based codes. But finally, if the zoning commission should decide to add the form-based code to the Simsbury zoning regulation, can it be done with a sunset provision of some time? That's my comment.
Thank you, Devin. Derek, you have comments or questions?
I do like the idea of having a sunset provision on it. It gives us some flexibility in the future, determining that length of time. I think we need to allow it to kind of take shape and see if there is some interest, but after a 3, 4, or 5 year period, if there is none and we come back and say, you know what, this doesn't necessarily need to be attached to our existing regs, then it's removed, but also give it the ability to be renewed on a regular basis also.
I like the sunset provision. I'm not sure if 3 years is enough. I think you see how long some of these projects have taken to develop, so I don't know if the right number is, but I would think more like a 5-year would make more sense.
Kevin, thoughts?
Are we doing specifically on that, or on?
No, I think if you, any topic related to this, so if you want to give it your ideas out.
Okay, well, I like the concept, but I did have 3 concerns with individual things here.
Okay.
One is, well, I expressed in the last meeting, was the fact that the north parcel could be developed as 100% single family, and I thought that was probably not the best use of that land, it being, our main commercial street in town, to just have it developed. It's industrial zone now, why would we allow it to go back to residential? Because we're seeing a lot. There's some technical things here that I assume staff will correct some of the typos that are in the document if you read it. One of them, on page 17, it says, any commercial use with a drive-through standards and blank apply. So we don't know what the blank is. So as we approve this, we're approving it without the full definition there, right? Thank you. And one of the other concerns, some of the things, the typos I'm talking about, it says either the Hartford north of south site. It doesn't quite make sense.
Probably means or.
Yeah, it probably means or. So it's pretty simple. Another one is that one of the things that the allowed services in here would be a gas station.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I kind of question that if that was our intent, is that we would want a gas station on either one of those 2 pieces of property. Yeah.
Well, you bring up a good question before, if we allow one, then, or if we
Well,
accept the code.
let's stay focused on this.
Okay.
Ned, any comments or questions?
I don't like the idea of turning it from industrial to residential, therefore I'm opposed to it.
As it relates just to the north piece or in general?
Pretty much the whole thing. I mean, it looked to me like what they're planning on doing is putting a lot of apartments in. And I know apartments are hot, but we've been through enough of these things where what's hot today is cold tomorrow. We end up stuck with a bunch of units that can't be rented, and we're creating the slums. We had this when a lot of people did the condominiums in the 80s.
Yeah.
They weren't owner occupied, they were held by speculators, and the units went in the south. They weren't maintained, and it wasn't a good move.
So there were a couple of other, are you? Okay. So I'm going to try to sum up, gain some consensus, and try to focus on a couple of issues and see if we can't come up with a code that we can gain broader support for. One of the issues that was raised tonight, and what we talked about a little bit, is the lack of public hearings for certain parts of the code, which runs a little bit counter to the way we operate normally. Now, if you really parse it down, the type 1 applicant really is somebody comes in and rents the building, buys the building or uses the building, and modifies it only moderately. So the fact that that would be a staff approval in essence, which again has been discussed, I think if you put it in the context of what is actually being approved, think of it as a replacement tenant. In any building in any part of town, you could do that without coming to the zoning commission. It's not a land use issue, really. And I think that if you look at the scope of all of that, that's really what was contemplated there. The type 2, where you could add to the existing building up to 25,000 square feet, I'm not sure if it really is clear, Hiram, as to whether they could put 20,000 square foot buildings on the south piece and have it be a type 2 application. I didn't get the sense that would be true.
No, I can address that if you like.
Yeah.
I
I would tell you this, that the code is clear that one 25,000 square foot building could be approved administratively, but as you know, under Connecticut law, and town attorney's here to correct me if I'm wrong, that still has to come to the commission for approval, whether it's on the consent agenda or whether one person on the commission wants it taken off the consent agenda, it goes to the commission for final determination. I would also tell you this, that in any section of the regulation where it says that the planning administrator or planning director gets to make a decision, that decision, if it were for greater than one building, would come to you. There's no question about that. And I think that if anybody here talks to your staff and on any basis at all, and certainly the chairman does hopefully frequently in the future as well, then any time that comes up, it would come to the commission for review and approval. So, that's absolutely the way that particular section would work.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Okay. A couple other things. I think Dave mentioned about process, about speeding up the process. And I would be happy to give you a short presentation at some future meeting about exactly what's going on in the center and which particular parcels are in play and what's going on with them now. But rather than waste time tonight, I'll just offer that in the future. This particular process is intended to speed up the process and to apply some certainty with regard to the process and what you see there. There are 4 different graphics that are part of this plan in the back, and that shows what the ideal would be, and that's what the commission would expect the developer to come in with a master site development plan to look like. The reason that the PAD is not appropriate in this case is because all those graphics are then worthless. The developer could come in with any particular proposal at all with no idea what could be there. And I think then some of the comments that were made by some members of the public would be of a concern. Could it be several hundred units of affordable housing? Well, right now, zoned industrial, it could not be, but that does not mean that the town is still not subject to 8-30G under the statutes. So what this puts in place is a pretty firm framework and still provides some flexibility for the developer as well, but still puts in place a pretty firm framework of what it's going to look like with regard to streets and building heights and building sizes. And there are building heights in the regulation too as well. Just want to mention too, the Planning Commission did in fact review this and referred it to the Zoning Commission. Their referral was positive with regard to the Zoning Commission's action. Another important thing that was mentioned quickly is that the Design Review Board's role is actually increased in a form-based code. Their responsibility and their comments with regard to any design that's proposed are increased under the form-based code far more than they are under conventional zoning. So the Design Review Board's role is actually increased. I think that was part of the intention of reorganizing the DRB the way it currently is now. It's also clearly the intention of this code that be the case as well. So those are the basic comments that I have right now, unless you have other questions.
Yeah. I would just say as it relates to those actions that are seemingly delegated to the staff, that just from my experience, first of all, we're talking about changing a regulation that will impact more than the 6 of us because it should survive any elected commission, and will probably survive Mr. Peck or any of these things.
Very easy.
So we want to be sure that we have a system that is sustainable for good reasons that you raised, Dave, and others as well. But that the judgment call as to whether or not it should be referred to the commission is really lies with those things that are delegated to Hiram, and he rarely would take advantage. It's a career limiting event if you overstep your bounds there. You get to do it maybe once.
We're not, my objection is not to
Right.
Hiram, but the
I
wording
understand.
there.
No, structurally, it is the zoning commission that approves these kinds of things, and as a result, the ultimate responsibility lies with us.
Okay, now I just heard that one building could be administratively approved. Did I hear that correctly?
We still have to come to the commission, Dave, though, for your final approval. Nothing gets approved by me, my final approval, under Connecticut
No,
law.
it goes on the consent agenda and would be brought in.
Okay, good. We can take it on or off the consent
Right.
agenda as we choose.
Right.
Okay, there were 2 other things. One is that in the type 1 application, what you say and what I would agree to is one thing. What this says is different.
In
on the
what way,
type
what
1
regard?
agenda. It said they can modify as necessary to reuse that building. That's what I read as a right or.
But if they don't change the form of the building and they move walls on the inside, that would not be a zoning commission agenda item in any
No, but
building in
if they
town.
changed a use, that would be a use that needed a special exception, for example.
Then it can't be, then that's not a type 1 that's not a type 1 application.
I don't understand it saying that.
If it requires a special exception, it would not be a type 1 application. Should not be accepted as a type 1.
Reuse, moderation, alteration, and maintenance of any building or site improvements that exist at the time of the adoption shall be exempt from this code. Shall include any alteration as a result of building reuse unless the building footprint is increased by more than 25,000 square feet. That says to me.
Yeah,
they
but it
can
goes
do
on
all
in the
kinds of
description,
things.
doesn't it go on in the description of a type 2 or type 3 application, those that require special exceptions? Or special exemptions, or not type 1?
That's right. Type 1 applications are going to be essentially reuse of the existing building, whether someone were to change the windows or to move some walls inside, they could do some.
Fine, I have no problem with that.
Okay. Let's be sure it says that. All right.
Well, that's what I'm.
Yeah. Let's go back to the item of the public hearing requirement. Bob, I'd ask, that this is sort of almost protection for us to be able to have at least some public comment on a project that would otherwise fit the form-based code. What kind of latitude would we have in terms of?
I think the question really relates to type 2 and type 3 applications.
Right.
Because
Because
type 1
type 4 is
application.
clear.
Type 4 is clear. Type 1 applications, you normally wouldn't have a public hearing.
Right.
Type 2 and type 3 applications, the final approval process, and Hiram, correct me if I'm wrong, is a site plan level of review. Now, 8-3 of the statutes does not require public hearings for site plans. However, court cases have consistently said that the decision and the criteria for establishing when public hearings are required for site plan are a function of the local regulations. Given that, you could, if you chose to, amend your regulation to require or permit public hearings for either,
At our discretion.
at your discretion. You could either require them for type 3 applications, because that's the bigger one, bigger level of development.
Right.
Or you could make them permissive for both. You could even make them permissive for type 1 if you choose to. Type 4 is already going to have a public hearing. And speaking directly to the type 3 application, you could get some fairly large applications under the type 3 application. The other thing is, anything that's called out in your use table as a special permit is going to require a public hearing.
Understood.
So when you look at what people would typically expect to have a public hearing for versus what is required for a public hearing here in this code, you could narrow that gap very easily by adding a public hearing requirement to type 2 and type 3 applications, either permissive or mandatory, depending on what you think is the best way to go.
So I want to be careful here that we don't dilute the main benefit of this as perceived by the Hartford, which is that, that if a developer brings a plan that matches the code, that he's,
Well, correct.
has a, I won't say strong green lights all the way down Hopmeadow Street. Didn't used to mean much, but now we have a traffic signal on every corner, But I think that the level of being able to permit us the opportunity to have a public hearing, if we think that there's some reason.
You may get an application which is sizable, or not even so sizable, and you may hear from the public, either formally or informally, that people are concerned about traffic. Now, the applicant, whoever they are, going to need to show that the traffic impacts are manageable or negligible, whatever. By having a public hearing, you give others the opportunity to come in and put into your record their view of traffic, and you as a commission often have that the case. With no public hearing, there's no means of getting that before you. And I think that's something that, even if it's a permissive public hearing, would it slow down the process? Yes, but some of these projects are in the ground for a very long time, and, you know, the way zoning is set up in Connecticut, it's focused on public input almost to a great degree. So that's one simple change you could make in type 2 and type 3. You could do it without the language because the courts have said it's up to the commission's discretion when to have a public hearing, but if you put it in the code itself, you would at least signal the public that public hearings are not prohibited, which they would never be, but are permitted by your action.
All right, so that's a consideration. When we make a motion, we can think about.
But it is okay for us to require the informal session, the way it does. Right? That was one of the questions, too.
Yeah, I looked at that. The informal sessions are based on 7-157, which isn't even in Title 8, which says that the applicant can request, it's sort of permissive but not mandatory. I look at it a little differently. The language of the statute is permissive. It allows towns to have these informal meetings prior to the submission of application. This code is very complex, very detailed, and it seems to me it's a sensible requirement that before you submit an application, you have to come in and present your pre-application to the staff to sort of make sure that the application is complete before it comes to you. The reason 7-157 was put in place many years ago was to make it clear that if informal discussions were occurring between staff and the applicant, that the applicant could not be bound by any representations made at the pre-formal hearing process, a pre-formal meeting process, really. It was really a protection for the applicant that, and the commission to some extent. So I'm comfortable with having a mandatory pre-application meeting. Now, what would you do?
This is with the commission, though. It's not, it's more than staff. It's with the commission.
You know, I understand that. And that's the way the statute reads. I've been saying staff, but it's really the staff and the commission. Some towns have, they meet twice a month, and every other meeting is strictly the informal commission meetings, and you're required under the regulations to go to those meetings before you submit an application. Now, what would you do if you got an application from someone who just refused to go to the pre-application process? I think the likelihood of that happening is very, very low, given what it takes to comply with the application requirements of this code.
However, if we were to make it part and amend it to add those, we wouldn't be, an attorney's opinion and a staff opinion would actually be in the regulation and be required.
Specifically, what are you saying, Ned?
That, now we're relying on Bob's reading of
Well, the code says it's
the
required.
code. Right.
Right now, the language is it's a mandatory pre-application
They have to come in and
meeting.
do it.
If we
Informal.
request it.
No.
No.
It's required.
Before an application can be accepted, this pre-application process is required, and I'm comfortable with that.
It's for 2 and 3, or any.
I believe it's for
Section
any
2 and 3 also?
It's all
Any
four.
application.
All four.
All
2, 3,
four.
and 4.
Right. 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, one wouldn't come to you anyway. One is handled by staff because it's more of a reuse of existing structures.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
And I'll be here in case any other questions.
Dave?
I have a question about, form-based code says some things about functions of the design review board. The charter says something else. Which is the ruling document?
Go up there and answer.
Yeah. Sorry.
You could think of the charter requirement for design review as a floor, not a ceiling. By that I mean you as a zoning commission have the power to establish rules and responsibilities for advisory commissions or committees, really, not commissions, that you think are helpful in your deliberations. As long as the design review commission isn't being asked to do something that is totally prohibited by the charter, I think you're okay. And I know the charter limits the design review, the new design review, reinstated design review commission to certain things. But I don't see any problem with writing a regulation which for this purpose and this purpose only expands it for this code. Plus, if you as a zoning commission think that that is what the input you need to properly administer this code, I think it's perfectly permissible given the charter language. This language, however, cannot carry over to the rest of the regulations in terms of the roles and responsibilities of the Design Review Board, unless, well, let's just say it can't.
We
because
had similar references in the PAD, David, when we approved that.
Yeah, PAD references
Those were,
Design Review.
those,
To the POCD.
the Town Center Code and the PAD were adopted before the charter revision.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And there was discussion about making some responsibility for, or control over, if you will, action so that the people responsible for it were involved.
Well, I didn't see anything in here where we abdicate our.
Okay, but it seemed to me to be growing beyond what the charter said. So that's why I asked.
All right, and I guess the last topic I wanted to just discuss is as it relates to your issue, Kevin, on the north parcel with the ability to have it be any one of the 4 recommendations rather than some sort of mixed use or combination. I'm just curious how strongly you felt about that, or.
Well, I'm kind of soliciting feeling from the commission here. If
Yeah,
we think
so,
that is the best use of those 40 acres. I mean, we have it as zoned industrial now. Do we want it, this is basically changing it to say that it could be
all
100%
houses.
residential, single-family houses.
Right.
And is that a change? I'm just making
Is
sure
that-
that we consciously make these
Right,
changes, you know.
right.
Okay, I myself am not in favor of making it 100% residential.
So if we were to say that, amend the language to say that they, that this is a type, that if they had to use 2 of those recommended uses, then if they had a development that was all residential, it could come in as a type 4 application, correct? That would be then required to have all of the explanation, the public hearings, all the rest of it. So in other words, if that was the most compelling offer that the Hartford got, and they still wanted to proceed with it, even though the code itself has said that we would really like to see some mixed use in the north parcel. It wouldn't say that it wouldn't be prohibited, it would just be the higher bar of a type 4 application. Is that true?
I think that's true. I think that it really is a, I shouldn't say double-edged sword, but I guess for the purpose of this explanation, I would, is that that wouldn't comply with, if somebody came in with that, it wouldn't comply with exactly what the master site plan development shows on the graphics. So the commission could consider that a higher level of application. You've already heard that you certainly have the ability to require a public hearing should you decide to do that. So if someone came in with an application that were unacceptable, it would go through the public hearing process. No question about that.
Okay, so and with that, if we made that change, would it make the whole thing more
That would be
palatable
more
to you?
palatable. I think, at least 2 of the 4.
But somebody down the road could come with that request, and we could review it and approve it at that time.
Yes, if the Hartford or any subsequent owner, because this code goes with that property.
Right.
Had a development plan that was 50 acre plus lots for $1.5 million homes, and they wanted to bring it to the town of Simsbury, to the zoning commission for approval, they could absolutely do that, but they would have to use the type 4 application process.
Okay.
Well, they could come to us with a request for a zone change and an application.
Well, sure, they could do that. And maybe we could add another 60 pages, Dave, just for your benefit.
Just on that last comment, there was some mention of sunset provisions, and I would tell you frankly, every single regulation we have has a sunset in a way, because if the commission decides it's not functioning as it's intended, you can decide to revoke it at any time. So rather than put in a specific deadline where everybody's kind of watching what the timeline is clicking away and biting their nails, I would just simply tell you that that's the reality of it. It functions that way anyway, frankly.
Another way to do that would be write in a mandatory review
of the regulation and its effectiveness and pick the number of 5 years, 4 years, rather than a sunset of mandatory, like the charter. The charter has to review it every 5 years.
Right.
You could have this with a mandatory review of the effectiveness after 5 years, a report on the effectiveness.
All right, thank you, Bob. So I'm going to give everybody one last chance, and then I'm going to lead with my chin. So, David?
I'm not comfortable with form-based code, the way it's stated in here. It seems to require things that are advisory. Plan of conservation and development, the guidelines for community development, these two walkable community documents we haven't seen. It requires the developer to say how he conforms to those things. That, to me, is a regulation. Is that not of concern to anybody? Obviously not.
Apparently not.
That's a concern that I have, but I think fixing the public hearing so that things aren't administratively approved, I'm assured that anything substantial is going to come to the zoning commission, that the zoning commission makes the decision. That's okay. I mean, that makes me feel better. The pre-application requirement, whether or not it's required, what if it isn't required? Does that make any difference? I don't think it does.
I don't think it does.
Anyway, moving the housing to the type 4, I think solves the problem of just making it 100% housing, sort of as of a right. It's got to go through our thing. So I think, though, with those changes, and a mandatory review time or a sunset provision, I don't care what. If you have a sunset provision, it doesn't matter. We're going to sit down here and say, should we end it or not? So there should be a mandatory timeline, as far as I'm concerned, for ending this experiment.
All right. I think I heard from everybody. All right. So,
You didn't
yeah.
address my gas station.
Huh?
You didn't address my gas.
No, I'm not going to touch that one yet. We'll leave that there for another day.
Didn't they say that if it's in a gas station, something has to come before?
Special exception.
Right.
Yeah, it's already an existing special exception, so. All right, so allow me to sort of sum up and see what I said. We really do want to recognize the great amount of work that has gone into this for a long period of time. Not just apparent, but very real partnership between the town of Simsbury and the Hartford. As you know, public servants, the commission, zoning commission, is tasked with trying to protect the town as well as advance its agendas for development, and we take that very seriously. I think we'll all take a little bit of responsibility with it. Maybe as these things develop over time, we could have paid a little better attention earlier to some of the details as they developed. But having said that, I think a lot of really good work went into getting us to this point. I would like to propose or move approval of this code with the following provisions and amendments, if you will. One, that we allow permissive public hearings for any type 2 or 3 application, and that we'll use that as appropriate based on what the actual application looks like. I want to be sure I get all of these. 2, that we make or reword the section on the north zone to be 2 or more of the following, with the understanding so that the wording is done in a way that if it's only one of those applications, it can come back as a type 4 application without prejudice, just because of that. What else did I miss? I think those are the changes that I would recommend we incorporate. And so I would move that for approval. I'm looking for a second.
I will second.
Seconded by Vaughn.
Okay, discussion.
Yes.
I would prefer to see type 1 included in the permissive public hearing, because if an application comes in, it's 600,000 square feet.
I'm all right with that.
A reuse of 600,000 square feet.
To
could,
allow
in
ourselves
fact-
permission to look at, to call for a public hearing if we think it's appropriate.
Right.
Fair enough. All right, so we have a first and a move and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Approved. All right? Thank you all for your patience on that. I'd like to invite Mike Doyle, alternate. Came too late to get a seat, but ask him to come up and sit down.
Sure, I'm not really dressed appropriately.
That's all right.
Get the memo.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Appreciate you being here. All right. Thank you all for your patience. We will now move to the second agenda item. Derek, do you have the call?
I think so. The Zoning Commission of the Town of Simsbury will hold a public hearing at a regular meeting to be held on Monday, July 7th, 2014, at 7 p.m. in the main meeting room at the Simsbury Town Offices, 933 Hopmeadow Street, Simsbury, Connecticut, on the following. 1. Application number 14-30 of Christopher J. Smith, Esquire, applicant Thomas Evans, owner, petitioning for a text amendment regarding changes to Article 10, Sections G sub 1 and G sub 2 of the zoning regulations of the town of Simsbury. Number 2, application number 14-31 of Christopher J. Smith, Esquire, applicant Thomas Evans, owner, for a site plan amendment and zone change from Zone I-1 to Zone PAD on the property located at 155 Hopmeadow Street, map F-17, block 201, lot 002A, Zone I-1. At this hearing, interested persons may appear and be heard, and written communications will be received. Signed, Robert Pomeroy, Chairman, dated 23rd June, 2014.
Thank you, Derek. We will have, Hiram? We'll have a presentation? Yes, okay, great. Mr. Smith, you are on stage. Thank you.
Sure, Chris Smith. Chris Smith. Shred card. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Town Planner Peck. For the record, my name is Chris Smith. I am a land use attorney and a partner at the law firm of Shipman & Goodwin out of our Hartford office, and I appear here this evening on behalf of the owner applicant, Tom Evans, concerning the two applications that are the subject of the public hearing this evening. Before commencing with our presentation, just some housekeeping items. I do have copies of notice letters that I sent to all the adjoining towns as well as CROG, and you have apparently 4 water authorities, including DPH, that are subject to the statutes 8-3I in that particular case. So I have those letters and the receipts, and I also have an affidavit signed by Mr. Evans indicating that he did place the sign on June 20th, and it's been prominently displayed at the front center of the property since that time through and including today. And I'd like to make that part of the record that is required in your, as you're aware, in your regulations. This evening there are 2 applications, and the first, I'm going to go in reverse order as they appear on the agenda, just so that it makes sense. The first is an application for a PAD pursuant to your regulations, and that is to provide for the redevelopment of the property known as 155 Hopmeadow Street here in Simsbury. The second concerns 2 text amendments, and one concerns the distance requirement for a gasoline station and certain types of uses, and the other one concerns gasoline stations and driveway widths associated with those types of uses.
And what I'd like to do before going any further is just indicate and introduce the members of the team who are here this evening with me. First, we have Mr. Tom Evans, who is the owner of the subject property. And next to Tom, on his left, your right, is Guy Heskath, our engineer, civil engineer with F.A. Heskath and Associates. And then we have Joe Santivano, who is our hydrogeologist, who you'll hear from in a moment. And then finally, Dale Cutler of Kenyon Cutler Architects out of Avon. And what I propose to do is, what I'd like to do is just go over, provide you with an overview concerning the applications, and then I would turn the floor over with permission of the chair to Guy Heskath, and he'll walk you through the civil engineering components. Then we'll hear from Dale Cutler concerning the architectural components of the, concerning the pool barn store. Guy will come back up and deal with the architectural components of the Cumberland Farms convenience store and gasoline station. We'll hear from Joe concerning some of the hydrogeology, and Guy concerning specifics relative to the tanks and the pumps and the tertiary system that's being employed by Cumberland Farms. And then I'll get back up and try to address, or will address, the components required for the PAD concerning your 2007 POCD and the Route 10 corridor study and a few other items. And at that point, and then we'll wrap up with Mr. Evans has a few comments that he'd like to make to the commission. So with the permission of the chair, just if I may, I do have a packet I'd like to submit to the commission that will assist in our presentation this evening. Much of what's in there concerns boards and some exhibits that you'll be seeing, including excerpts from your POCD and the Route 10 corridor study. So with permission of the chair?
That's fine.
I think I have enough copies.
We can share.
I got one.
Okay, and I can give one. And just to quickly walk you through the packet, and once again, much of what's in here our consultants will be referring to. It's just a reduced version of some of the items that we'll be addressing in the presentations. I just always feel it's nice to, having sat on boards and commissions over time, it's nice to give that to you so that you can refer back to it as opposed to just relying on the board that happens to be up on the easel. The first exhibit, I provided you with a copy of the zoning applications. That's Exhibit 1. Exhibit 2 is a reduced copy of the aerial depicting the overview of the subject property in the area. Exhibit 3 is an excerpt from the site plans that Guy will be referring to, Guy Heskath. Exhibit 4 is a rendered site plan and architectural rendering that Mr. Cutler and Mr. Heskath will be referring to. Exhibit 5, colored elevations and floor plans of the mixed-use renovation of the existing pool barn store. Exhibit 6, we have the colored elevations for the Cumberland Farms. Exhibit F, our hydrogeologist, Joe Santivani, will be referring to, and that is an excerpt concerning the Connecticut River Valley geological cross-section views. Exhibit 8, boring locations that were taken on the property to determine where the groundwater flow goes. Exhibit 9 is a plan entitled The Generalized Surface Water and Groundwater Flow Direction Within the Local Drainage Basin, and that Mr. Santivani will be, Bassi will be referring to and demonstrating in his conclusion as to the groundwater flows concerning the property. Exhibit 10, I provided you with an excerpt from your 2007 POCD, your Plan of Conservation and Development I'll be referring to. Exhibit 11 is an excerpt from the Simsbury Route 10 corridor study that I'll be referring to as well. Exhibit 12 is your zone map in a very reduced version size. And Exhibit 13, I provided you with a copy of the resumes from the consultants that you will be hearing from this evening. At the outset, I would respectfully refer the Commission to Exhibit 1, and that's just the cover letter that I prepared. It's dated June 5th, 2014, that went with the applications. And once again, I'm going to provide you with an overview and then turn the floor over, the podium over to Guy Hesketh, who will walk you through some of the engineering and the site development proposal itself. But once again, the owner applicant is Thomas Evans, who is the owner of the subject property, 155 Hopmeadow Street. The applications concern the redevelopment or adaptive reuse of the subject property, which currently has an unused building known as the Pool Barn Store located upon it. Now, as you're aware, the adaptive reuse concept is one of the goals of smart growth policies, which is incorporated or are incorporated into your PAD requirements. And I would also like to point out that the existing Pool Barn Store structure, historically, it was built in 1911, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Guy Andale. But the existing structure was used not only in the tobacco industry, but it was used for retail, light manufacturing. There were guns that were actually assembled there, automobile repair and service uses over the years. So you have that type of uses that have been made of the property during that time period over the last 100-plus years. The property is located in the Industrial 1 Zone District and comprises approximately 1.87 acres, has public water and sewer. The immediate neighborhood, I'm sure you're familiar with, it's the Southern Gateway, as referred to in your POCD. Comprises a number of mixed uses, including retail, drive-through and sit-down restaurants, offices, shops, unused industrial sites. We have one just to the north of this site, and multifamily and single-family residential dwellings, and immediately to the south, a synagogue that's located in an industrial zone. Now, as to the PAD application, we are proposing, there are two major components to it. One is preserving and renovating the Pool Barn Store, and within that is proposed various retail and office uses, space, as well as 4 townhouses, residential townhouses that will have 2 floors, and the way they're being designed is that they can be used completely as residential, or you can have a home occupational use on the first floor and the residential sleeping quarters on the second floor. So trying to provide a little diversity in housing needs to address your POCD that we'll get back to a little later on. Adjacent to this mixed-use structure is the proposed Cumberland Farms with a gasoline fueling service and convenience store component, and also an integral component of this proposal, which goes to open space and public amenities that are required as a consideration in your PAD, is that we are providing access to the adjacent Farmington Canal Heritage Trail system, and also different enhancements, some bike racks. There will be a shelter for people that are utilizing the trail, and then there'll be access directly to the Cumberland Farms store for the public bathrooms and to be able to buy whatever they choose to buy in the convenience store component. So once again, the proposal provides for retaining the historic structure known as the Pool Barn Store, which is the gasoline use, the gasoline station and convenience store use, as you'll hear later from Mr. Evans specifically, is really an essential component to generate a cash flow that makes renovation and preservation of the Pool Barn Store feasible. And once again, we'll hear a little bit more about that from Mr. Evans. And then finally, we have those 2 zone text amendments that I'll come back to after we hear about the PAD and the specific site development, which I think everybody is concerned about hearing. And without any further ado, if there are any questions for me, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Guy Hesketh, who will walk you through the engineering and provide you with some specifics concerning that and the proposal for 155 Hopmeadow. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, is this okay to?
That's
have
a
the
fine
drawings
look,
okay?
yeah.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Guy Hesketh. I'm a licensed professional engineer with F.A. Hesketh & Associates.
Our corporate offices are in East Granby, Connecticut, and our firm worked with the applicant in generating many of the items that you have before you as part of the application, including the plans, the site plan sets that you see, the drainage study, or stormwater management study that was submitted, and also the traffic report. And I've got here to my left an aerial photograph of the area, the neighborhood, so to speak, and I've superimposed over it our proposed site plan, as you can see in the color scheme here. The site's located at 155 Hopmeadow Street. It's located between Hopmeadow Street and the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail, which I've got the text here to show where that is. This is Hopmeadow Street. To our east is the Hartford. You can see the extent of that here. And there's some apartments located to the northwest, and commercial entities to the south. There's to the west, there's some apartments and residential units. The site contains the former patio and pole barn, which on this drawing is represented by this yellow rectangle that you see here.
Guy, if I may, excuse me, for the record, this is Exhibit B, a reduced copy of what Guy is referring to as Exhibit B in the packet. Sorry, thanks.
Currently, it's there's just the pool barn building is there, and there's some cleared site with some gravel parking located to the south of it. It's got an existing access drive, which is in the same location as our north drive that you see here in the plan. There is, around the property, there's a drainage ditch that runs along the southern border of the property, flows from an east to west direction and then a northerly direction between our property and the railroad grade. That is an intermittent water course that's been identified by our soil scientist. The primary purpose of that is to pick up stormwater runoff from storm drain systems that are located in the state highway on Hopmeadow Street. It also picks up some stormwater runoff from the building that's to the south of us. Again, in the industrial zone, it's currently occupied by a synagogue, I understand. Part of the parking lot for that drains into that drainage feature. And then the water flows to an area wetland up here through Minister Brook and then ultimately to the Farmington River. You can see Farmington River is located on the east side. So, the former railroad grade had a crossing. There's a culvert, and we call it the bridge, that connects Mr. Evans' property to the former railroad grade or the Heritage Trail. We think historically that was used probably to access a railroad spur when they did loading activities, either from the agricultural or the manufacturing uses that were taking place along here, whether they had carts or something that transported that material across this ditch itself. That feature is about right in the center of the site, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. So it does allow us to have access to the rail line, the former rail line or the trail itself, which is an interesting feature of the project. A close-up of the site, I can show you here in this rendering, site plan rendering. The pool barn building, again, is here. It currently extends almost all the way to the right-of-way line of the highway. It was a taking line. There's actually some steps and some structure that actually encroaches on the state highway line. If you go out there now, you'll see there's a stairwell that goes down into the building. That's actually part of that is on the state highway, within the state highway right-of-way. Our proposal is to remove about 40 feet or so of the front portion of that building. Dale will talk a little bit more about that. And the foundation would remain, and what we would do with that is create kind of a patio seating area, a landscape feature here in the front. And then the rest of the building would be restored, and I'll explain what the various uses are for that. We're proposing about 2,400 square foot of retail space in the front half of the building. 3,320 square foot of commercial space, which would essentially be the first floor of the second half of the building. As part of the retail space in the front portion, there's also 800 square foot of retail storage area, and then the upper floor of the front portion of the building would be 3,200 square feet of warehousing. And as council indicated, the back portion of this is an option for a commercial use on the lower floor and studio apartments upstairs, or they could be townhouse apartments, so we're providing for 4 residential units or residential combined office, commercial/residential areas. And then we've got construction of the new convenience store, which is 4,213 square feet. and a canopy where we would have the fuel dispensing taking place in 4 dispensers for 8 vehicle fueling positions that are located under the canopy. And then access to the site would be provided by 2 driveways, one in the general location of the existing the northern driveway, we're calling it, where the existing curb cut is. It's actually reduced. The curb cut that's there now is quite wide. We're going to reduce that a little bit. And then we've got another access along the southern portion of the property here. Fuel tanks that we would be proposing as part of the fuel dispenser would be located in this portion of the property. You can see here a concrete pad, which typically put over the fuel pads to allow for access in that. And then we've got, on the site plan, we've got a couple of other pedestrian-friendly features that we're proposing. We're going to propose an interconnection here to the Rails for Trails path. And then this location here is where that existing culvert is over the drainage swale here. We'll provide access for pedestrians to come and enter the site. On the east side of the building here, we're proposing sort of a little outdoor patio seating area, which will have some tables and some umbrellas. It'll have a railing around there to prevent, just kind of hold people in there so that they don't have a direct access to the parking area here. And then that will allow them to come through the seating area. And there's an entrance door that's located on the side here. Conveniently, the bathrooms are located right here inside the building. So one of the intentions of that is to allow people who are using the Rails to Trails to come in if they need to use a restroom. Cumberland Farms policy is it's a public restroom. You know, you make purchases, you can come in here and utilize the restroom. If you want to buy drinks or water or snack or something, you can get it, enjoy it, and picnic tables here. We're providing for some bike racks. We've got one up in this area here. Got another bike rack here underneath this tree to provide for people to come in with their bicycles. They can certainly park them there and take advantage of the facility. We've got an area here where dumpsters will be located. Those will be covered or protected or screened, I should say, by vinyl fence product so that it won't be visible from the street with gates here to allow access to that. A couple of the other features are there's a air dispenser that'll be provided in Connecticut when you have gasoline sales. You have to provide air also free of charge. That will be provided here at a dispenser, and there'll be a cross-hatched area out here to allow vehicles that park on either side to have access to the hose if they need to fill up their tires with air. And one of the things we're showing on our plan, it shows up labeled on your drawing LA1, is some electric vehicle plug-in stations, I guess for lack of a better term. Right now, we're showing them in this area here. In reality, we think that these will probably be located somewhere over in the area here, more geared towards the retail. And the reason for that is because it's a higher turnover use. People don't come in here and spend a lot of time, so you're not going to come in and plug your car in for 5 minutes while you're running to grab something. It would make more sense to have them in a different area. We show them mine just to show you that our intent is to have those as a future installation, and we're proposing those. Getting back to the driveway here, one of the things that council indicated is we're looking for some relief from the requirements under Article 10G2, which has to do with width restrictions to a driveway. Your regulations indicate that for gas stations, a driveway, or service stations, the driveway has to be a maximum of 30 feet wide at the property line and then 40 feet wide at the curb line. The problem with that is that doesn't comply with any of the standard that DOT has. And the reason that is because if you have a 30-foot width driveway at the property line and then 40 foot at the street line, then allows you a 5-foot radius. A truck, most passenger cars, a large passenger car couldn't make a 5-foot radius without tagging the curb. With a truck, we're required to have a radii that will facilitate the design vehicle. In this case, it's a wheelbase 50 vehicle, which is the tanker truck, to be able to make it from coming in on southbound on Hopmeadow Street, to be able to make that turn without mounting the curb and without crossing over the center line. So that would require to have this radii increase to a point where the width at the curb line would be larger. And what we're asking for is that the radii be allowed to not exceed 60 feet, but to allow for the radii transition between the curb of the driveway, the curb line of the driveway, which is essentially this line here, and the curb line on the travelway itself. So that's what the purpose of that is. We are providing paved parking. These areas that are shown in gray are the areas that are paved parking. We did a parking analysis based upon the intended uses, and I provided for that on sheet LA1. I won't get into it in detail, but you do have a parking analysis table in your plan. What it provides for are different uses which we are proposing on the site, which are storage, retail stores, warehousing, commercial office, and studio apartments. If you look at the analysis, it indicates, as you go through the square footage breakdown, that we're required to have a total of 71 spaces. Our proposal provides for 72 spaces, so we do meet what we believe is adequate parking in harmony with the parking requirements of the regulations. Regarding stormwater management, in your package, or on the plans that you have, sheet GR1 shows the grading of the site, and it indicates where the stormwater drainage structures are located and where they discharge to. And I'll just point those out on the plan. We have a couple of drainage systems. We have one catch basin that's located here, which drains into our water quality basin, which I've got delineated and depicted in green right here. Then we have a number of catch basins that are located in the low points adjacent to this island, up here and up here, that drain through a structure and then again discharge into the water quality basin. From here, there's an outlet structure that provides relief, and that outflow from the water quality basin again discharges into that drainage intermittent water course that's located along that western boundary of our site. The water quality basin we've designed to meet the Connecticut DEP standard for treating what they call the minimum water quality volume. And in a nutshell, what that is, a quick summary, is that if you take 1 inch of runoff over your site, which is representative of 90% or more of the storms that you would anticipate to have for any given storm, and you capture and treat that, then you're treating the water quality volume. So we're providing the size of our basin to be able to treat that minimum water quality volume. In addition to that, well, the DEP's position on that is if you can capture and treat the minimum water quality volume with the primary treatment method, which this would qualify as, you treat 80% and remove 80% of total suspended solids from the stormwater stream. In addition to that, we are providing some hydrodynamic separators as part of our storm drain system. What those are concrete structures that have fiberglass baffles in them. Stormwater enters into them, flows through a baffle configuration, and it's designed to capture total suspended solids, which settle to the bottom, and floating debris, which floats to the top. In addition to that, it also handles liquids that are lighter than water, for example, petroleum-related products. We are proposing structures here at the site, which are STC 900 units, which are hydrodynamic separators that have a total capacity of 952 gallons. In addition, they have a 251-gallon capacity for hydrocarbons. So each of these units has a capacity to capture 251 gallons of hydrocarbons. The drainage patterns on the site right now, essentially water runs off either to Hopmeadow Street, eventually into this ditch, and comes down around our site, overland towards that drainage feature, or overland to the north. It all ultimately ends up in what we're referring to as a wetland community, which is located north of our site. When we get done our development, all those drainage patterns will be maintained. We do have a couple of storm drainage structures also located here in the right-of-way because of grade differential here. We're going to capture the runoff on these driveways and pipe it directly into the headwater of this drainage feature in this area here, which is where the current DOT storm drainage is released. And then our other storm drainage structures, again, will come into here and come through our site. So the drainage pattern, when we're all done, we're essentially getting water to run off to the wetland community that's located to the north. Now, we did submit as part of the record a comprehensive drainage analysis, which included two things. One of them was a hydrologic study, which takes a look at the pre-developed or the existing condition, determine what a peak rate of discharge is from the site. And then we look at a post-developed condition, we model runoff coming through this basin and how much of that runoff actually leaves the site. We can utilize an outlet structure that has a 6-inch orifice on there to throttle back that water so that it's only flowing through a 6-inch pipe to get in here. What that allows us to do is, with our post-developed condition, we significantly reduce the peak rate of runoff leaving from our site. Those numbers are included in the drainage report. It's about 20 to 25% of what we have under the existing condition, under the proposed condition flows off-site. So it's a marketable reduction in the amount of stormwater. We were careful when we initially went to your Conservation Commission and Wetlands Commission. We had proposed some stormwater management features. They asked us to make some upgrades. And one of those upgrades was for the hydrodynamic separator that we're proposing for this storm drain system for the watershed, which is picking up most of the fuel dispensing area. We doubled the size of that unit so that it would pick up more hydrocarbons, and that was incorporated into the set that you have before you. That was something that we did for the Conservation Commission. We did develop also, at their request, a post-construction stormwater management plan, which is included in the notes that are on the sheets that you have before you. And essentially what that is after the construction of the site, what are we doing to help maintain the integrity or the cleanliness of the stormwater? And we're proposing to do parking lot and drive sweeping quarterly in the spring, summer, and fall, and then in the winter, pending if the snowfall. We'll be doing a parking lot sweeping. And what that is a vacuum sweep truck that removes a lot of the sediment and any of the debris that get in the parking lot. We're going to inspect the sumps of the catch basins quarterly. Sumps will be cleaned when sediments reach 1 foot in depth. That'll be or a minimum of every spring. The hydrodynamic separators will be inspected quarterly, cleaned every spring, or when the sediment reaches 8 inches in depth, and that's what's recommended by the manufacturer. We do have some velocity dissipators in our stormwater outlets, the outfalls we have to the state system. By the way, the state system, we're going to kind of...
Guy, could I just interrupt you? And I think the level of detail here is probably a little more than we need for tonight. So if we can...
Speed it up. Needless to say...
I'm not saying I'm not really interested, but my eyes are glazing over. So
needless to say, our water quality measures are as requested by the Conservation.
That would be adequate, yeah, thanks.
Also, soil erosion sedimentation control measures are in conformance with the state requirements for both the water quality manual and also the sedimentation erosion control guidelines. Site lighting, I have submitted in your package an analysis of site lighting. Real quickly, it involves use of LED lighting, perimeter lighting around the perimeter of the parking area, 14-foot mounting height. And in addition, we have some pedestrian level lighting, 7-foot mounting height. And canopy lighting under the canopy here, and the canopy in front of the building, canopy in front of the pool barn. The photometrics are in your plan. They show essentially no trespass at the property line or the street line.
Can I just ask one question? You mentioned when you did the calculus for the parking spaces,
Yeah.
The relative allocation of the space, and especially in the existing building. I didn't find that quickly. Could you?
Sheet LA1.
LA1. That's not in the book though.
No, that's on the reduced copy of your plans that you have. The 8.5 by 11 plans you have in front of you.
This one here?
Yeah, that package there.
What number is it?
LA1, it should be this, I think it's the second sheet in.
What
But
number?
it's not in this.
No, not in the book, on the 11 by
thank you.
17
Exhibit 3.
sheets.
Exhibit 3 is existing conditions, and then LA.
I see. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
I walk through that, or?
No, I just, he had referred to it, and I hadn't focused on it, and I'm curious about, there were some comments at design review today about access, pedestrian crossing, and I want to, in my mind, think about if we were to give up a handful of parking spaces in favor of more, a couple crosswalks, for instance, or a landing area in front of the Cumberland Farms building to walk from the pumps to the building to protect it. A crosswalk there, and right in front of the Cumberland Farms building at the main door. Take 2 out there and put a concrete jutting out there as a way to just direct pedestrians to that spot, and then a safe walk from. I'm just trying to respond to some comments that were made earlier, and so what I wanted to know was, how much flexibility there are in terms of the number of parking places. If, for example, the building didn't have the apartments, does the apartments lower the requirement? Probably, or I don't know.
Yeah, conservatively, what we did is we looked at the highest intense use, which would be the
That's where I
commercial
was
on the
headed.
lower
That's where I
level
was headed with
versus the
this.
apartment,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So if there were apartments, full
So we took
townhouse apartments, it would reduce the number, certainly.
And then there was a comment about the walkway in the back and those 3 parking places.
If we were to eliminate one of these parking spaces here, we could have the walkway come straight here. That wouldn't be an issue.
All right. Thank you.
With regard to the parking, is it going to be allocated parking such that people who want to come in and start their bike from that point, that they won't be able to park there? It seems like a good access point to the rails to trails, such that somebody might want to drive their car there with their bike and then access the trail from that point. Is it going to be restricted parking?
The lease agreement with Cumberland Farms would have this area dedicated for their parking. In this area here, that would be certainly flexible.
Yeah, and just Chris Smith for the record. 2 things. Planning Commission, actually, a couple of folks on the Planning Commission, it was 2-2. The 2 negative votes were concerned about residential, and we do have that proposed, but of course the commission has the discretion to include or not include that, and we certainly would be open to either of those options. And secondly, to address the specific question concerning, the idea isn't to have a public access point for me to show up in my car and the bike rack in the back and then take off my bikes and then take off in them, but it's to provide access for people that are already on the trail.
Oh, I understand. I'm
But I
just
wanted
saying
to
it-
clarify that for
that's.
parking space purposes.
But the perception is that, or the reality is that people are going to use it as a entry and access.
But I just wanted to state that it's not the intent to
Absolutely.
designate, okay, these 5 spaces here will be, designated for public.
The concern is that you meet
That's sufficient.
you meet it by 1 extra space, and the reality is you're probably going to have more spaces for people who end up doing that. You end up with a parking problem, and then tenants who are upset at people, using their spaces for, otherwise allocated to retail. And then you get into a decision, well, are these reserved spaces? I was curious if that was contemplated.
Absolutely. I didn't want to leave you under the misimpression that
No,
there was
understood.
going to be designated spaces. And then, of course, when you're considering the parking, we will have consolidated parking to the extent, as in any mixed-use proposal such as this, even though it is smaller, you're going to have a residential component and then a business component, retail, and presumably everybody's not going to be there essentially at the same time. At least that's what I found, in larger scale developments and in more urban setting. But, this is kind of unique in having this in a smaller parcel. Okay, thank you. Sorry. One other quick item on the signage for the site is proposed on the detail sheets and in the elevations. You can see some of the signage. Probably best to look in your package, the 11 by 17 package. Does everybody have that? That was submitted as part of the application. Yeah, that would have been submitted as part of the application.
Yeah, but it was reduced in a way that when we got it, never mind.
On sheet NT1, we do have a signage calculation. The regulations require or allow for 1 square foot of signage for each linear foot frontage on the building, and I can just quickly summarize what that is. The Cumberland Farms building has 101 linear feet frontage facing Hopmeadow Street. The pole barn has 40 linear feet. So the regulations allow for 141 linear feet of signage. That would be the maximum required, or maximum allowed square footage. We are proposing 8 wall signs that will be located in each of the tenant spaces here for the pool barn. Total of, each one would be 5.33 square feet, so a total of 42.66 square feet. Convenience store has 1 sign at 59.6 square feet. That's located at the front. We'll get into that when we do the architectural. And a freestanding sign in front, which is located here, which would be 32 square foot total. So we have a total of 141 square feet permitted. We're proposing 134.3, so we do fall within that requirement for your regulation.
So we'll have the staff look at that, just as it relates to the regulations.
I just wanted to get that on the record. There are some requirements for, not exceeding a certain percentage of length in the building. Again, we do comply with those. In a nutshell, that's my presentation for that, and we're going to talk a little bit about architecture. When I do my architectural thing, I will be even briefer than.
5 and 6. 4 and 5.
And Chris Smith, for the record, hopefully you're picking me up, a couple of the exhibits that Dale will be referring to appear as Exhibit 4 and Exhibit 5 in the packet. Thanks. Thank
you. Good evening. For the record, I'm Dale Cutler, Kenyon and Cutler, our partner of Kenyon and Cutler Architects. Our offices are in Avon, Connecticut. My responsibility as part of this project is the adaptive reuse of the building we all euphemistically referred to as the pool barn. As others have mentioned, the pool barn itself, the existing building, is about 4 feet away from the highway taking line right now. This is the portion that Guy was talking about that actually does extend into the highway taking line. The building was built in 1911 by the American Sumatra Tobacco Company. It was their primary warehouse for cured tobacco. It was also a location where the tobacco was sorted and was prepared for shipment, hence its location near the railroad. The building, the interior of the building, just because of that function, the fact that it is a warehouse function, is an extremely sturdy building. I think a structural evaluation was done for the building, and the result of that evaluation is the building can hold about twice what we normally consider for library stack loading. So it can support like 300 pounds a square foot. The interior structure of the building is very heavy timbers. At the first floor, timbers are about, the columns are about 10 inches square and about 10 feet on center. So it is a very sound structure. And fortunately, although it is over 100 years old, it's been maintained well enough, so we haven't had the kind of problems that you would normally expect for a building of this nature. There haven't been water leakages. There hasn't been a lot of deterioration. The exterior wall is a very sound, full 2-inch by 6-inch stud wall construction. So it is a building that is really an appropriate candidate for some adaptive reuse. This is the floor plan of our intended plan. As Guy mentioned and others mentioned, because of the location of the building, it's so close to the street, we are removing 40 feet, 4 bays of the front of the building, and actually creating a new exterior wall, again 40 feet back. That would be that development would be consistent with any kind of development on this site, because the building as it exists really does constitute a hazard. It's a sightline issue. You really can't see around the corner. Those of you that are familiar with the site, so it's something that would really be done as part of any development of this site. But what we are going to do is, even though the building is coming down, we're going to retain the foundation wall, really treat it as a garden wall, so we get an opportunity to develop a nice outdoor space, which could have a number of different functions. One of the things that could be an adjunct function to the retail portion of the building, which is located at the eastern end or towards Hopmeadow Street. Again, so there's a nice tie between this outdoor space and the proposed retail functions. The western portion of the building, these 4 bays, are where we're considering a mixed-use, commercial, residential, or it could be all residential. The plan, the first plan here shows what would be like an office use on the first floor with a small bathroom, a stair up to an apartment up above, 1-bedroom apartment up above. Using that same footprint, kind of moving over to the next bay, shows the development of a two-bedroom, a very generous two-bedroom townhouse. So it could be done as a 100% residential for this portion of the building. And then we talked a little bit about parking. The component of doing commercial on the first floor, residential on the second floor, actually requires more parking than if it were developed as 100% residential. I think, as Guy mentioned, the parking tabulation presumes the worst case scenario as far as that tabulation is concerned. This shows a proposed elevation study for the reused timber barn building. This is the elevation from the parking area, looking at it from the south. I want to get that confused. This is actually the view from the south. The area where we are proposing retail, we will do a full covered porch. There will be a ramp providing handicap access up to that level. That porch itself will be open on the areas where we're doing strictly retail. Instead of doing the full porch canopy, we're just doing smaller individual entrance canopies. The porch itself could extend all the way down the building, allowing handicap access to all the tenants, to all the uses. Second illustration is the redeveloped east elevation looking towards Hopmeadow Street. On this elevation, as well as the other elevations, we've used existing openings, window openings, providing obviously new windows, new energy efficient windows, but again, retaining kind of the character of the barn, trying to maintain that. Exterior materials would be fiberglass shingles, which currently exist on the barn. That roof is actually fairly new and in fairly good shape, and will retain a lot of it. The porch canopy will be a metal roof, which you'll see in the development of the Cumberland Farms proposal, that they also have metal roof, and we'll try and tie those type of elements together. I think probably the easiest way to segue into the design of the convenience store is with this rendering, which you also have a reduced copy. And this is, showed you initially, this almost like before and after. This is almost taken from the same angle, just to kind of show you and this is an accurate depiction of the size and scale of the buildings on the site. This is the new end elevation of the pool barn. This is the area we're talking about as far as the garden area or outdoor terrace area. This is the beginning of the porch that runs down the south side of the building. The convenience store in Pump Island, the small freestanding sign up in front, and it is an accurate depiction of that, of the site development. I think that's pretty much it as far as
thank you.
Place. Yes.
Your company name is spelled.
Again, Guy Haskell for the record. Real quickly, this depiction to my left is the architectural rendering of what the Cumberland Farms will look like. Starting at the sidewalk, we've got a 3-foot stone facade, gray and brown in color. There'll be a stone water table on top of that. The siding here would be vinyl clapboard. The trim that's on the building itself would be a synthetic wood trim around all the accents and things here. A vinyl product. It would be painted green where the green stripe is located here. The rest would be a gray tone. Gutters and downspouts would be white aluminum. You see here. Dale talked about the standing seam metal roof. There's a portion of that that's located here. You can see it on the side of the building also. And then architectural shingles would be charcoal colored architectural shingles on top. And again, the dormers on the artist depiction, they had shown them as kind of a gable dormers, but we're going to use the shed dormers so it matches what's shown on the pool barn building itself.
Again, side view, you can see there's an ornamental fence that's located here, a hard-coded fence that will, pedestrian scale lighting that's located there, tables and, umbrellas and seating areas, things like that. And then the feature in the front would be a gable feature, and it would be, would have some white fiberglass column sleeves located over this. A quick view of the back and the sides. Again, same color scheme. The utilities would be located on the rooftop here. We were showing a sort of a picket fence up here, the design review committee wanted to see a solid opaque type of fence in there. We agreed to do that. That would kind of screen that from the rooftop utilities from the top. Side of the building, again, same elevation, same metal roof, gables and the charcoal shingles. Again, the sign itself would be here. It's a sign that would be mounted to the building itself, and it would have downlighting gooseneck type feature, so it's not an internally illuminated sign, so it does meet the requirements of your signing regulations.
Question on the glass. Is it actually tinted blue like that, or is
No,
that?
that's just, I think
for
that's
effect?
just, yeah, for effect to show that. Really quickly, I'm going to just describe, we did submit a traffic report for the record, very quickly. We looked at traffic counts that were done in 2003, averaged 12,900 vehicles per day. Traffic counts that were done in 2005, when the Hartford was in full operation, 15,980 vehicles per day. We did some new counts in 2014, we get almost 1,100 vehicles per day. So there's been, over the years, there's been a steady decline in the amount of traffic on Route 10. We did two analyses. We looked at the 2014 numbers.
Did you say 1,100? Or 11,000?
Yeah, 11,000.
You said 1,100.
11,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, from almost 16,000 in 2005 to 11,000,
yeah.
so it's dropped quite a bit. We took a look at our 2014 numbers, did a 2% projection to 2015, utilized that in an analysis, and then compared it to the 2005, assuming that the Hartford was fully occupied. We looked at the trip generation numbers based upon the use. There's two ways you can do it. You can look at the use, and we look at the use of the retail versus commercial. You come up with a number. Or you can look at a percentage of the pass-by traffic, which is typically done for convenience store use. We took the hires of those and used that in our analysis. Then we looked at the distribution. Convenience stores have a distribution of 70% right-in, right-out traffic, 30% left-in, left-out traffic. So what you see on these type of uses is people pass by. If they can make a quick right turn in, they use it. If they're going up the street and have to make a left turn and there's any kind of resistance, they just kind of pass by and they figure they'll go in later on. That's in the literature. We utilize that. We did also assume that 100% of the traffic is new traffic. That's more conservative approach. In reality, this is not a traffic generator. It is pass-by traffic. People that utilize this type of use are typically those who go by for convenience, hence convenience store. But we utilized the 100% new traffic in our analysis. The long of the short is that we come up with some analysis that indicates that for the 2015 traffic that we're coming up with our counts, we have level of service A on the north and southbound approaches. The site driveways are level of service D or better. With the Hartford analysis, we have level of service A on the north and southbound traffic. At the site driveways, we have a level of service C for the south driveway, level of service F for the north driveway. What that indicates is a 50-second delay. So if you're turning left out of the north driveway during the peak PM hour, which is the highest traffic, you'd have a 50-second delay of that. What does that mean? That is typical of any development that you have along Route 10, trying to get in and out of a driveway during the afternoon peak hour, typically. So it's nothing really different than that. We also looked at pass-by capability. What we are going to propose is similar to the widening that was done as part of the Dunkin' Donuts that was done, a 20-foot half section. If you provide from the center line of the road 20 foot over, what that allows is for people that are making a left-hand turn, it allows adequate pass-by for people that want to get by the traffic. Dedicated left turn lanes are not required. It doesn't warrant the volume for that. So we would propose doing a widening of about 2 feet or so on the the east side of the road to accommodate potential left turn lanes into the site. We looked at existing site distances. They're in excess of 600 feet in both directions. We're required to have, for the 45 mile per hour, 85th percentile speed in northbound direction, 500 feet, so exceed that, and 445 feet in the southbound direction, which is a 40 mile per hour 85th percentile speed. So our traffic report details those, and if you have any questions on that, I certainly can answer those for you. And I'll turn the time over to Joe for council. Just a little intro.
Okay, for the record, Chris Smith, this is the Exhibit B in your Exhibit 2 in your packet. And this is an aerial of the neighborhood and the subject property. And one of the things that we dealt with conservation and in wearing their wetlands hat, and we did receive an approval from them, was we did hear from various citizens from the Hamilton Lane neighborhood, which is located just to the southwest of here, and they do have a community well located in their neighborhood that services those homes. The well is approximately 500 feet. You'll hear a little bit more about this in a moment, but it's about approximately 500 feet, almost 2 football fields away from where the station will be located and the underground storage tanks. One of the things that we wanted to look at, Mr. Evans wanted to look at, was and feel some assurance concerning, was if there were to be a release from those tanks, which way is the groundwater going? So Mr. Evans hired Mr. Santavazzi, excuse me, a certified hydrologist to perform a hydrogeologic study to determine which way the groundwater is flowing from that neighborhood actually under our property and away from that well. And you'll hear from Mr. Santavazzi in a minute that it's essentially traveling in this direction, in a northeast direction, away from the well. And that's the underground groundwater, the groundwater in the area in this particular drainage basin. We do have a hydrogeologic study that was prepared by Mr. Santavazzi, and it's dated February 28, 2014. It's part of the record with the Wetlands Commission, the Conservation Commission. I think it would be important to include in the record this evening, so I'll hand that out in a moment. While we were before Conservation and when they made their approval, one of the things they wanted Cumberland Farms to do was to add some additional containment measures to the tanks and the piping system and the dispensers and the sumps. And Cumberland Farms agreed to do that. So essentially, all those components are going to involve tertiary protection. So essentially, we will have a triple wall protection with monitors, monitoring the tanks, the pipes leading to the sumps, and then the dispensers themselves. And Mr. Hesketh will walk through that in a moment. And we do have documentation from Cumberland Farms, and they apologize for not being able to be here this evening. They don't have contrary to popular belief, they don't have a huge number of folks that are in their site development group, and all their folks are out in different locations throughout the different New England area this evening. So they wanted to extend that. But we do have all that documentation. It's basically in letter and memo format that we provided to the Conservation Commission. They've incorporated that into their approval, and obviously that's our plans. So I think it would be important not only for the Commission, but also for the citizens who were not here from that area of town, who were not there here for the wetlands proceedings, to hear the testimony from Mr. Santavazzi as well as Guy Hesketh concerning the once again, first the hydrogeologic study that was performed concerning where does the groundwater go, and in particular giving consideration to the Hamilton Lane community well system, and then secondly the tertiary system that we've agreed to install with Cumberland Farms has agreed to install with this proposed service station. So what I'd like to do is, Joe is coming up here, is I'll hand out the hydrogeologic study. He is going to provide you with a summary of what's in there and be referring to various boards, and the exhibits will appear as Exhibits 7, 8, and 9 in the packet. And then Mr. Hesketh will get up and walk you through the tertiary components, And to that end, I do have two documents from Cumberland Farms. First of all, for the record, the hydrogeologic study report is prepared by Advanced Environmental Interface, Inc. It's dated February 28, 2014. And then I have a document that's entitled Cumberland Farms, Inc. Underground Storage Tank Compliance and Emergency Response Program. And this deals with the training that is involved with folks that are employed there, as well as the individuals that are involved in making the deliveries. This, I don't believe, is dated, but it does have a number of attachments, A through E, but this is their current, through representations of Cumberland Farms, this is their current response program summary. And then actually attached to that is a single sheet that does the Cumberland Farms Retail Emergency Response Plan, and that's basically a little summary sheet that all of their employees and the individuals making deliveries have. So with permission of the chair, I'll put those documents, I'll hand one out to each one of you, and I will provide a copy for the record as well.
We killed some trees.
Yeah, well, I thought it was important for everybody to have this. Before you know it, everything we're all doing is you're going to have your screen up and we're doing it now. I'm sorry? There is a traffic study. It's part of the record already. That information. No, I think it wasn't handed in. It's already been handed in. I'll find out what it is. Okay, the first document was the hydrogeologic study. And I have the other documents from...
Maybe we should just hear from Joe, from Joe. Can we have Joe? I'm really watching the clock. It's 10 minutes to 9. We have a lot of people that like to get some comments on the record. And
We might take a half hour and read this first before we go.
What's that?
Don't we want to take a half an hour and read this before?
No, it's not going to happen.
Don't worry, I won't make a motion to close the public hearing tonight.
Should have had a sandwich.
Okay, Joe, I think we're looking forward to your presentation. I'm almost, this is the last.
Don't wear us out with this, but we want the information.
You're welcome.
Very important.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Joe Santovasi from Advanced Environmental Interface. I am a co-founder and principal of AEI, and I am a Connecticut licensed environmental professional, a certified groundwater, a credential in groundwater science from the National Groundwater Association, and I am a certified professional geologist. My charge here was to evaluate if there happened to be an accidental release of gasoline, where it would go, and whether or not there were any nearby drinking water wells, including the shared well on Hamilton Lane, whether there would be any risk to those wells. And to make a long story short, I looked at several pieces of information that were available in the public domain from the United States Geological Survey, from the Connecticut DEP, and from other readily available resources. I took that information, and from that information, I developed a conceptual site model, which in 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions, I was able to look at the hydrogeology of the site and the area. And just to summarize, hydrogeology basically is the study of how groundwater flows in the subsurface. The geology forms the structure of the sediments and rock below grade, and groundwater flows through different materials in different directions and at different rates. My study entailed a review of several very prominent texts that were written on groundwater flow in Connecticut, and to confirm my model that I developed based on the research that I did, we actually did on-site measurements of groundwater levels, the change in groundwater level over the course of an entire week, with measurements made every 2 minutes with a special data logger that we inserted into the wells. And I guess I'll get right to my conclusions, and then we can go from there. I concluded, based on my two-dimensional and three-dimensional evaluation of the hydrogeology of the site and area, that the Hamilton Lane shared well field and any wells in the area would not be at risk from any release of gasoline from the proposed Cumberland Farms facility. And there are multiple lines of evidence that I used to reach my conclusion. First of all, and I think this is a pretty good start with this drawing here, the groundwater flow in the shallow part of the site, which would be in the sandy and silt and clay-like materials below the site, would be in this general direction here, to the north-northeast. The well field of concern is, the well is about right here. Okay, so the groundwater flow direction is opposite the direction of the well field. In the deep bedrock, bedrock is deep on the site, over 100 feet deep below, and it consists of sandstone. The groundwater flow in bedrock is toward the Farmington River to the east, following the slope of the sandstone, which in some places in town here actually outcrops at the surface. In the north part of town near Terriffill, you can see some really nice sandstone outcrops and see the way the rock dips. Because of the groundwater flow direction in the shallow part of the aquifer this way and in the deep part of the aquifer this way, you can see that the well is upstream of any release of gasoline or hydrocarbons to the upper part of the site and even the deeper part of the site.
How deep is the well?
The well is, based on information that we got from the health department, it's 140 feet deep, and it draws water from a 60-foot, approximately a 60-foot interval from 80 to 140 feet below grade. Well, the water table on the site is very shallow. It's within 10 feet below grade. When we measured it, it was between 4 and 6 or 7 feet below grade. So any gasoline that would be released from the tank systems would hit the top of the water table. And in my experience over 25 years of assessing groundwater contamination, gasoline contamination normally stays within the top 10 to 20 feet of the water table. So we have a pretty sizable distance between where that gasoline plume would end and where the well would draw its water. And on top of that, we have a protective layer of very fine sediments that consist of very fine sand, silt, and clay that extends from about 20 feet below grade to 120 or so feet below grade. So we call that an aquiclude or an aquitard. It is very resistant and has a very low permeability to water flow. So that acts as a very nice buffer between the upper part of the water zone and where the drinking water well would be obtaining its water. The actual on-site measurements that we made to assess whether or not there was any effect on the groundwater levels from any pumping well in the area showed no movement at all over that 1 week period of 2-minute measurements. So we saw no impact at all from pumping activities from whether it be that well or any other well that might be a further distance away. We checked the water company records, and there are no active drinking water wells, with the exception of that well, within 500 feet of that site, especially in a downstream direction. And the key to this also is that the State Department of Environmental Protection indicates that a contaminated groundwater plume within 500 feet of a drinking water well would be considered a significant environmental hazard. So we are more than 500 feet away from this well. But not only are we more than 500 feet away, we are in a downstream direction of that well. So contamination would not move toward that well. In addition, the Connecticut Department of Public Health has a publication that assesses the susceptibility of a drinking water well to contamination. And they indicate that if there is a layer of an aquitard, of fine materials, low permeability material, more than 25 or 50 feet thick, they consider the well to be at a very, very low risk of contamination. So based on all those evaluations, both on-site measurements and off-site research, I was able to reach the conclusion that the Hamilton Lane well field and any nearby wells are not at risk from any potential release from this proposed gasoline system.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just real quick, again, for the record, Guy Hesketh, I want to give a quick summary of the type of tank and piping system that we're proposing for the fueling facility. We originally proposed a double wall tank and double wall piping when we went before a Wetlands Commission, and they indicated to us that they wanted to see something at a level higher than that, so we revised our proposal and submitted for the record, which was approved by Wetlands, that we are using triple wall tank. Essentially what that is a fiberglass tank which is compatible with both water and hydrocarbons, that it's inert, essentially inert. Has a brine solution between the primary and secondary containment with level detection built into it, and then a dry detection in the tertiary interstitial of the tank. They're monitored continuously if there's any leak, whether it is groundwater intrusion into the system or product release from the system. An alarm will sound. There's a third-party annual inspection that's done on the tanks every year, which includes looking at all the monitoring equipment. And then as a check to that, they do an inventory control on the product inventory, what's coming in, what's going out of the store. The piping was originally proposed as a double containment piping. That has been revised to a tertiary containment piping system with triple wall piping that has, again, interstitial monitoring, flows to a dispenser pump, a sump that is actually located under the dispensers themselves that provides for tertiary containment for the double piping in the dispenser. And then also at the tank itself, the sump that's located there at the other end of the pipe has a monitoring in it. So liquid detection is done in the tertiary containment. And again, the piping that's utilized is leak tested annually, pressure testing to determine the status of that piping. So those are some of the changes that were made. In addition to that, the fuel dispensing itself, there are some other measures that are built into the system. There's positive limiting barriers that are constructed around the pad itself, which are essentially grooves that are in the pad. If you go to a gas station, you'll notice that. What that does is provides for, if there is a spill at the dispenser itself, it's picked up by the positive limiting barrier. The hose itself has a breakaway fitting on there that will allow if someone inadvertently leaves it in their tank, it breaks away and shuts off the fuel flow. The dispenser itself, the dispenser holds will not be used here. Some of the gas stations, when you turn the dispenser on, you have a little tab that you can clip to hold it on. That's not proposed at this site. Someone physically has to hold the handle on the dispenser in order to make it work. The system in the canopy itself has a fire suppression system, a sprinkler system that's in there. And then around each of the dispenser units, there's steel bollards that are providing protection. You've probably seen those steel pipes that come up that will allow, if a vehicle gets too close to it, the vehicle hits the bollard and not the pump itself. So those are a number of innovative technologies that are utilized on here. Again, tertiary containment, I'm not familiar with any other gas station in the town of Simsbury that has tertiary piping and tertiary tanks in there. Historically, we understand that some of the gas stations had some issues. My understanding is that those date back to older technologies, primarily steel tanks, which were susceptible to corrosion if there was water in them. Again, these are fiberglass tanks. They're the innovative, best management technologies that are out there today, and those are being utilized here at the site. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
With the monitoring, is that done locally or is it off-site?
The monitoring for the tanks, that's a third.
Oh, you're monitoring.
Yeah, there are electronic devices that go to the store itself, and the monitoring of the alarms, and the employees are trained when alarm is sounded that they notify, depending on if it's a potential release, they notify Cumberland Farms and the local fire marshal and DEP in the event.
Similar to, we did have these same tanks for the Pride.
I was going to
gas
say,
station.
this sounds exactly like what we were talking about,
right.
the two Pride.
But those are new. Those are being put in now. Same.
Oh, the one across from Wagner Nissan?
Yes, and another one in the middle of town. Yeah, same deal.
Oh, yeah, the other one on Hopmeadow. Yeah, the technologies today are totally different than they were even 5 years ago, and they account for a lot of this. But the monitoring of the tanks themselves is done by a third party, where they come in on an annual basis, fill out a tank report. Piping is also done by a third party. They actually do physical pressure testing of the lines, fill out reports, and those are filed.
Chris Smith for the record. What I'd like to do is just touch upon the POCD and the Route 10 corridor study. There are exhibits in the packet to demonstrate consistency with that, and then very briefly touch upon the zone text amendments. I know we've been trying to do this within about an hour at this point, and we'll try to wrap it up sooner than later for the chair and
We
for the
certainly want to
commission.
hear from Mr. Evans, and then we would love to hear from all the people that came to hear about this. So,
You probably don't have to hear about this stuff. Right.
go ahead. What?
You think we have to have out the Route 10 study?
I'll just summarize.
I would suggest to you that you should be brief here. Okay.
2 minutes, 120 seconds. I know you've been assured that before by other legal counsel, I'm sure. The POCD makes reference to this being the Southern Gateway and recommending mixed-use developments, and you will find that all along the corridor from Weetag to the center and then north of the center. I provided you with excerpts from your POCD concerning that. In particular, with the Southern Gateway, pages, I believe it's 92 through 96, it deals with the Southern Gateway and promoting mixed uses, consolidated parking, and then with the Route 10 corridor study, promoting bicycle uses and making utilization of the trailway, which I respectfully suggest we're all doing. I can come back and revisit that at another time if you desire. So that's it with the POCD, under 2 minutes, maybe under a minute. What I would like to address is the two text amendments. The first one, the driveway width, you heard from Mr. Hesketh as to why your current zoning regulations just won't work. I mean, they're actually create an unsafe situation with having the driveway widths as narrow as is provided for in your regulations. And what we're proposing for, and it's in Exhibit 1 in the packet, is certain width requirements, and then there's a cap that's tied into a 60-foot radii. And Mr. Hesketh helped me to draft that, assuring me that that would comply with DOT and would satisfy their concerns relative to this or any other similar type of land use. The second text amendment does concern distance requirements for gasoline stations and various types of uses here in the town of Simsbury. And specifically, if you go to Exhibit 1, we have as Exhibit A to the packet, it concerns Article 10, subsection G1. And this is where you do have a 400-foot radius requirement for churches and other types of uses. This would provide the commission that you would be able to reduce or eliminate this distance requirement when such use is part of a PAD, I'm paraphrasing, application, when the commission finds that the use complies not only with the PAD requirements, but also will not result in an adverse impact to the public health and safety. If you think that's too broadly worded, you certainly have the ability within the context of this proposal to be more restrictive. With legal notices, that's how it works. You can't expand it and make it less restrictive, but you could make it more restrictive. And for example, we do have a situation where we have a synagogue located immediately to the south of the property. The building's about 100 feet away from where the pumps are proposed. And it is also located in an industrial zone. There is a letter from the rabbi from the synagogue that's part of the record indicating no objection to this proposal. And the commission could, within its discretion, modify the proposed text amendment if you were to see fit to accommodate this proposal and provide that the distance requirement shall not apply to a church located in an industrial 1 zone. And then that would take care of it from our perspective. So you wouldn't have it apply throughout the town. And even applying throughout the town, you still have that discretion. But I just wanted to indicate that for the record. And along those lines, Mr. Evans did perform an analysis concerning your other stations in town and these similar types of uses. I don't know if you'd like to hear from us on that particular item. We can do that very quickly. And then Mr. Evans, I think, has just a few closing comments.
I think we all know where the gas stations are in town and what's across the street.
I think it speaks to the demand.
Huh?
I think it might speak to the demand.
You want to hear it? Sure.
I
Let's hear
mean,
it.
I
We'll be
know
brief.
everybody's sensitive to time, but I mean, this is a pretty
All right,
big
fine.
deal.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. For the record, we have Tom Evans, who is the owner of the subject property, 155 Hopmeadow Street. And maybe what I'll do is,
Okay.
It basically was to see where you could put a gas station, or where the ones that are existing are allowed.
Right.
There's a Pride station you approved here, but it's in the
Right.
middle of an aquifer. So even though in this zone you could put a gas station, the aquifer covers the whole zone, so you couldn't, it's not permitted in the town. It was grandfathered, so you approved it, but no. Down here, St. Mary's, the mobile at 955 is across from St. Mary's, directly across, not approved, nearest school, church, playground, it's not approved. Further down the Getty at 950 is directly across from the ABC school. It's within 110 feet. The Lamb daycare is within 200 feet, and the church boundary is within 200 feet of the Methodist church. 360 feet to the park behind it, so it has all, none of that would be approved. Further down, the Pride Station that was approved, Life United Methodist, Life United Pentecostal Church just opened up across the street in 507 building, the old school building. It's across the street. I just saw the signs in the Sunday sermon. So it's 90 feet away from the Pride Station now, so that wouldn't be allowed there now if it wasn't there anymore. It's also next to Miss Lisa's Montessori School. The mobile station is the 410, was relocated back in '78. And at the time it was relocated, it wasn't, from my look at the maps, it wasn't properly zoned, but it was relocated from further down. The one on West Street is zoned I2. It was zoned I2 when it was approved. It wasn't, gas stations are not permitted on an I2, but it was also, if you go further down, the Exxon, which I own, former Gioni's Exxon, was, at the time it was approved, it was in the I1 zone. It's across from the Wheaton Park. It's now M&M Quick Lube, but still an auto service center. There's nothing from here to here. If you look at the closeness of here, everything's pretty close. There's always been, since the 1950s, a gas station on this south end of town, always. Since then, the population's grown from 5,500 people up to 24,000. So it's, if you go, the Shell station down here, it's okay. But if you look at the other locations that are B2 or B3, which you could put a gas station in, you go here, next to Billingsgate, that's on top of an aquifer, it's not permitted. You can go out here, that's the only other B2, B3 you can put it, but there's actually a church within 300 feet of it, a church on the corner over here. So,
St. Jeff.
yeah, so there's really nowhere you can technically, based on your zoning regulations, I went through it with Howard Beach last week, and you know, we basically went through the whole thing.
We got it.
Yeah, so anyways, so that's it.
Well, and twofold, not only relative to what sites are impacted by this particular regulation, but I think historically the reason for these distance requirements and with these types of uses, and also with liquor establishments and you know, restaurants with a bar, or whatever the case may be, was for a perceived public health safety issue. And I guess the second point we're trying to make is there really isn't a public health safety issue relative to these distance requirements. I mean, you have these stations existing already, coexisting with churches and whatnot that have been around for quite a number of years, and it hasn't been a problem. And once again, we have one situation with a synagogue. We're not sure if it was actually ever received any type of zoning approval, but it is located in an industrial zone, and that would be one way to kind of signal that out, and that would be permissible, in my opinion, under Connecticut land use law, for you to make our proposed text amendment more restrictive. And in conclusion, I think, Tom, do you have a few things that you might want to say, just as far as the development of the property and the efforts?
Yeah, I tried for about 5 years to find, I bought this back in '09. I bought a few pieces. I bought 6 buildings on Hopmeadow Street. I used to live here when I was younger, and people who bike down the corner to lose the 5 and dime. So, I bought the old Lily's restaurant, tore it down. I put up the Dunkin' Donuts, put up the yellow building, and Dale Cutler designed it beautiful. Looks like Sturbridge Village. When he designs the buildings, I tell him, don't spare any expense, do a good job. I'm proud of that project. I tried to propose another one at 132 Hopmeadow. I got shot down for it, but the pool barn here, and I've held onto that for 6 years. Got it for a lease sign, for an available sign. Unless you build something, like the 138 building, the yellow one that the Live Every Day went into, when you build something and somebody can go into it and see a nice, beautiful building, they'll rent it. So the 155 building came here 5 years ago. I started marketing it 5 years ago. I haven't found any legitimate tenants for it. Somebody wanted to do an indoor flea market in there on Sundays, but other than that, nothing. The uses that I understand it's grandfathered for was automotive used car sales. It was a machine shop. It's grandfathered for retail. When the Deuce Restaurant used to be a bar and grill, used to be across the street where Lily's is, it was given an approval from zoning for 65-car parking for the retail parking for the bar across the street. But I haven't been able to find anything. The yellow building, I got a yellow building sitting here at 138 Hopmeadow and the other one at 132 Hopmeadow. When I built the yellow building, I got a half a dozen people wanting to rent it. The synergy from the Dunkin' Donuts, just the visibility. The doctors love it there. They're very successful. They're doing great. The two therapists. They gave me the idea for the gas station. I've got a gas station background. After I thought of it and went to the engineers, I went to the design review and I went to the zoning commission a couple of years ago and I asked what they thought about it. I went to the rabbi first and asked him. The rabbi said, you have 100% of my support. So he said he not opposed at all. So so I went and after I left here and the board said that they thought it was a good thing to pursue, I went out to try to find a tenant. I called all over for the Dijon tenant in the center, and I found Cumberland Farms. Cumberland Farms said, after back and forth, they said, well, they go to the site, but they're not going to spend any of their money. If I can get it approved, they'll go there. I've spent over $100,000 in the last 2 years getting to this point, and I believe in the project. I think if it's built, I'll be proud of it. The pool barn's a great building, and I think the small uses, the 800 square foot stores, are something that it's a size that people can afford. They can afford to put a store in they can afford $800-900 for a retail space. So, and if I have to do the lid work once, I think those can work too. Somebody can have an office or an art gallery downstairs or a studio, some upstairs. So I think it works. So
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our presentation. I presume that there'll be questions from not only the citizens and the public, but also from the commission, and we'll have an opportunity to respond
To them and provide any type of rebuttal that is deemed necessary at the appropriate time.
We generally do that, especially if there are questions. I don't really like the word rebuttal, but
So in conclusion, I would respectfully submit that the applications do comply with the PAD requirements and to the requirements for a zone text amendment, that the proposal is certainly consistent with your comprehensive plan, your zoning map, and your zoning regulations, as well as your town's POCD, and would respectfully submit that would not result in an adverse impact to the public health and safety. And that's really the triple-pronged test that you have for a zone text amendment or a zone change. Thank you very much for your time.
thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, so we will now open for public comment or hearing. Could I have a show of hands of how many people would like to speak tonight?
Mr. Chair, my name is Tim Fitzgerald. I represent several of the neighbors from Hamilton Lane. I was going to try to summarize some of their positions and then have some of the folks talk individually.
Yeah, I would greatly appreciate consolidation. You have all been extremely patient and thoughtful in listening to the presentation, so I don't want to cut you short, but to the extent that you can consolidate groups of people or thoughts, and if a thought has been made and you want to make it again, you could just say ditto and we'll move on. I mean, we want the record to show how many people are for or against or the comments, but I'd be glad to start with you. Thank you for offering.
Again, my name's Tim Fitzgerald. I'm a general practice lawyer in Glastonbury. I also do a lot of land use applications, and I know your perspective because I served on the Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission for 13 years. And I'd like to pass out, here's one for the record. I did summarize all my comments after reviewing your regulations.
Thank you.
And I'd like to start where the applicant left off, and that is the text amendment. We do not feel that it's a wise thing to totally eliminate the buffer between a gas station and other automotive uses in these sensitive places. It's one thing to say in a pad that you're going to have some ability to relax it. But you can't just use the very broad nebulous standard of general health, public health, safety, and welfare. There's no standards in that. So it needs to be very specific, and it needs to be tied to the actual parcel, the development parcel that's being proposed, and the character of the neighborhood. Now, having this, a required buffer, a mandatory minimum buffer, is a pretty common feature in zoning regulations, and you've had it here for quite a while. The fact that there are some pre-existing gas stations really doesn't prove anything. And the fact that the applicant mentioned, well, we look at the map, where can you put a gas station in a B2 zone? Well, we're here tonight for a gas station in a pad zone. So it's not simply, you can't simply look at where are the B2 parcels, because we're here tonight on an industrial zone parcel. The executive director provided a letter. Now, he didn't use the phrase 100%, and it was very curious. There was an old date in type, and then there was a handwritten date. I'm not sure I know what all that means. But he said he had no opposition at this time, having reviewed the plans. I don't know if he reviewed the very current plans, but the more important point is he speaks for himself. He doesn't necessarily speak for the entire board of directors of that synagogue. He doesn't necessarily speak for all the members of that congregation, and he certainly doesn't speak for all the members of the public, who might have a very different view about totally eliminating a required buffer between these sensitive places. I mean, you have a gas station. Gas stations are now almost always accompanied, as tonight, with a convenience store proposal. You have tanker trucks. You have a lot of traffic. You're going to have queuing to get in and out of the driveways during peak hours. The traffic study wasn't exactly glowing in that respect. These all impact these sensitive uses. So we think it's a big mistake to totally eliminate that. We don't see a reason why a pad gas station proposal should be treated any differently than a gas station proposal in a business zone. I don't see any logical reason to treat them differently. People going to one of these sensitive places where there's a gas station in a business zone, they're going to have the same impact as if it were in a pad zone. Putting a pad label on it doesn't really accomplish anything. So we question the lack of standards if you were to decide to relax it, and most important, we are adamantly opposed to a total elimination of the buffer requirement. Now, I notice your planning commission looked at this and unanimously said, no, we don't like this idea. I think that should give you very great pause in coming to a different conclusion. So that's our first point. You should not eliminate the buffer, the minimum buffer, between these sensitive places and gas stations and other automotive uses. And the fact that it's in a pad, that's really of no import. Number two, and this had me scratching my head, if you look at page 122 of your pad regulations, an eligible zone, the I-1, you have to have at least 10 contiguous acres. So I don't even understand how this proposal can even get to first base. This is 1.87 acres. It's in the industrial zone, and it's clear as day that you have to have a minimum 10 acres. So I don't think you have even the authority or the discretion to disregard. That's a standard in your pads, and it's a mandatory standard. It's non-waivable. So I asked Mr. Peck last week if I missed something, and I didn't hear anything to indicate I missed something. Another strict standard in your pad is open space and public amenities. Now, granted, the walkway connection to the bike trail, that's a nice feature. That is nice. And you have apparently room for a bike rack, maybe two. I don't see in the world how you can put a shelter in. And if you say, all right, we're going to put a crosswalk in, we're going to, tweak the parking calculations, maybe you have a few extra spaces. I mean, using a very generous allocation for storage, you need 71 spaces. Again, that's with a generous allocation for storage. This has 72, and if you go downward, that doesn't help. So there's no room to put a shelter. There's no room to have dedicated parking for bikers, and you know they're going to want to do that. They're going to want to do it a lot. They're going to want to do it occasionally. Who knows? You'd find out. But it doesn't sound like a good idea. Your pad regulations require open space. And I quote you in my letter, the exact text. And this is open, it's open space, means open space. Now, there's no open space in this. There's none. There's the walkway, that's an amenity. There's the bike racks. The whole idea of a pad is in exchange for some leniency and flexibility in the normal regulations for development, and this would be the industrial zone, the public gets something back. All right? We submit that this proposal, which totally lacks open space and has a very modest amenity, simply doesn't justify the pad zone. Now, on the merits of the pad, the neighbors from Hamilton Lane, the surrounding area, they're going to speak about some of these points, but I do mention them in pages 4, 5, and 6. The applicant described the housing part as a unique housing component. I think that's being real generous, unless you mean unique as 4 units that front a convenience store parking lot with absolutely no amenities, no deck, patios, lawn area. And we are really skeptical that there's a demonstrated, strong identified need for this type of housing. Yes, the POCD mentions diverse housing in a few places, but there's nothing specific in the POCD that talks about this. We find it really difficult to believe that these mixed uses are going to be compatible. I mean, there's a lot of mixed use here. Convenience store, all the parking, the apartment / work studio, the retail store with a pool barn with a whole second floor of storage, and then a busy convenience store, and the gas pumps. That's a lot of stuff for 1.87 acres. And we wonder, is that going to work? Are these compatible uses? We don't think they are. Pads are supposed to be pedestrian friendly. Now, you got the connection to the bike trail. That's nice. But this isn't a pedestrian oriented proposal. This is heavily automotive oriented. Pull in, store, pumps, pull out. There's going to be a steady flow of traffic. That's not pedestrian oriented. And you can't. The problem is, the whole problem with this pad proposal is it's undersized. It's undersized. You can't really have meaningful open space. You can't accommodate all these intense uses. You can't do it. And provide for the real economic motive of this proposal, unquestionably. Everyone knows that. It's the gas station and the convenience store. The employment opportunities, maybe there's a handful of low-wage jobs in there that subtract from other employment and commerce elsewhere in town. Now, the adaptive reuse of the pool barn, that's a plus, no question about it. That's a nice plus. But the dominant architectural feature of this proposal are gas pumps, a canopy, and the convenience store. And they might be a little better than average in terms of what you see in gas stations, but it's still a gas station. So that's the net economic architectural benefit you get is very limited by the fact that this is the dominant proposed use for this parcel. Now, it's true, Inland Wetlands Conservation Commission gave the permit. They were constrained by a very narrow administrative review. Is there evidence, substantial evidence that shows that there's an adverse impact on the wetlands and the watercourses. So based on that standard, the applicant got his permit. But if you read the actual opinion, they did not find this to be an optimum place for a gasoline station. There will be spills, there will be accidents, they always happen. We don't know when, we don't know exactly how. Common sense says it's going to happen, and you have a high water table. Your planning commission, when they reviewed very briefly and the references in the POCD are pretty sparse. Some of them aren't even, that were cited by the applicant, they're not even related to this location. There's nothing of any detail or specificity in the POCD that supports this as being consistent. And when the planning commission decided their referral, what kind of report were they going to make to the zoning commission? It was a 2-2 vote. But they focused only on the excerpts from the POCD. They did not look at the comprehensive plan. They did not talk about it anyway when they came to their vote. They did not talk about the comprehensive plan. That's your zoning regulations. And the Planning Commission is not in favor of changing the underlying zoning regulation that would make this proposal go forward. So in that sense, I think they thought through their referral, because all 4 Planning Commission members said, we do not want to change the amendment, Article 10, Section G, about reducing, they didn't want to touch the regulation at all, reducing or eliminated a mandatory minimum buffer. So, we think you shouldn't change that text amendment. You should not adopt it. If you do, you have to draw meaningful distinctions, and you cannot totally eliminate the buffer altogether. So you have underground tanks in this proposal that are about 45 feet. I looked at the map. Might be off a few feet, approximately 45 feet, the underground fuel tanks from the actual wall of the synagogue. And that's possible if you eliminate the buffer entirely. So we don't think you should do that. And you should really look at, is this a good pad for Simsbury? It seems to us that the pad concept here has been kind of stretched out of shape. You got a 1.87 acre parcel. It just simply can't intelligently incorporate these intense mixed uses. I know some of the neighbors want to hit a few points in that regard. Thank you.
For the record, I'm Todd Picken. I live at 4 Hamilton Lane. Picken, P-I-C-K-E-N. And I also serve as the president of our Well Association for the community. There's a number of concerns that I have, one of which is additional work on my behalf to actually report VOC levels as a result of the Farmington Health District. That is actually something they've asked me to do if this does go forward, because they're concerned as well about any contamination. The well itself was built in 1968. Serves 7 homes. We have approximately, like you said, 140-foot well. It's right at that in the ledge area depth. I would say that while it looked like a lot of those studies show that the flow is away from that well, there can be cracks in some of the ledge that could potentially cause contamination. I'm not willing to take that chance after having a well that's been running for our community for a very, very long time, and quite frankly, it's a best-kept secret in Simsbury of very good water. There are under 25 residents that use this well. We do not report publicly. However, I do have to submit testing annually and have Avon Plumbing do that for me. One of the things that concerns me also is that we have mentioned several times these hydrodynamic separators. Think of it as a septic tank where the solids settle and the fluids can run off. If there's a huge spill by any of the tankers filling any of these, and it runs off, which is quite frankly just a few feet from the flow of water that runs into Minister Brook and the Farmington River, That's a large volume, okay? Those separators aren't going to contain that. Depends on how big the spill is, right? It's fluid. It's going to run. So common sense would dictate to me that those measures will not really do the job if it's a major spill. My sub pump locally runs about every 15 seconds. I have a huge electric bill. I'm literally 600 feet from this site. The surface, as we mentioned, 6 feet groundwater. That concerns me. The other concern that I have relates to really ground ozone levels from the hydrocarbons. It's been found through studies that can reach close, the smell of that can reach approximately 300 feet around the area. And it also has some serious health effects for anyone residing close to a gas station on a regular basis, smelling the spillage, okay? We feel as though, depending on the wind, our neighborhood will smell that, okay? I have eyesight right to that property from our backyard. You may not see our homes from Hopmeadow, but you will definitely see that development. We do see the Dunkin' Donuts lit up at night in the evening from our well house area. As mentioned before, the Conservation Commission finds that the site was not optimally suited for the development of the gas station. It has a high water table and is bound by two sides, of intermittent water course that runs nearby wetlands complex and contributes to Minister Brook and the Farmington River. I think the Conservation Commission was legally constrained by its narrow administrative inland wetlands process and the review of that proposal, but wish they could have done something different as far as decisions there. There are multiple reasons why this is a bad idea. It doesn't make any common sense. For the record, I'm a pro-business guy. I've not sit in front of this committee ever. I've been in town for 25 years, okay? It just doesn't make any sense. I'd love to see something that really maintains the character of this town. As my youngest goes off to college in another year, I'd love to be able to stick around. But I prefer not to see something that brings in the type of traffic that this will bring in, and quite frankly, lower the standards on which we've had such high standards over the years. Thank you very much.
John Carroll, 31 Terry's Plain Road. If I could vote twice against the use of the PAD in this case, I would do it. I agree with the first speaker and most of his points that this is an inappropriate use of the PAD.
Hi, good evening. My name is Isabella Danielson. I live on 2 Hamilton Lane in Weetag. So before I even start, if that's okay, I'd like to hand to you, Mr. Chairman, some petitions that we have of residents who oppose the gas station. We have hundreds of signatures of people who do not want to see a gas station on that site. Can you spell the last name? Danielson, Danielsen. So I'm going to be talking about a very few points here regarding the housing components that's being proposed. So the applicant praises this PAD as having a unique housing component. It's definitely unique. I've never lived next to a gas station. I don't know anybody here who has or even who would like to live next to a gas station. So my point is, it would be unique, but it would be unique in a detrimental way, not in a nice, unique way. And the reason why I say that, it's because there would be space constraints, no decks, porches, patios, lawn areas. The tenants would be exposed to noise pollution, light pollution, smell pollution, gasoline fumes, traffic at all hours of the day and the night, 365 days a year. Potential for explosions, vandalism, robbery, or worse. People who move to Simsbury, as opposed to, like Attorney Smith mentioned in the Planning Commission meeting, as opposed to South Norwalk or even New York City, they don't move to Simsbury to look for this kind of environment. So I can speak for my family. We were living in Seattle for a number of years, and we moved back to our home in Manchester, Connecticut, in a very beautiful neighborhood, but it is Manchester. So my husband and I decided that we wanted to live in a better place, in a better community, in a community where the character of the town would be wonderful for my son, who is 3, and my daughter, who is 6. So our family bought a beautiful, beautiful home on Hamilton Lane, onto Hamilton Lane. And we did so expecting this beautiful character of our town. And I'll tell you, I would have not purchased my home if there was a gas station on the proposed site that Mr. Evans wants to build. This may not be terribly unusual, again, on the dense urban areas, but it's not the prime objective of the PAD for a town like Simsbury. It isn't. Hundreds of apartment units have been approved for Simsbury in recent years, very close to the proposed gas station. The PAD proposal does not meet a strong identified need. Moreover, who would want to live next to a gas station? I think that would drive low income, low renters, and not what we want in our beautiful, beautiful town. So this housing component, as compatible with a gas station and a convenience store, how is this compatible? When, A, the residents of apartments will have no outdoor space or common areas. There will be bustle, commotion, and noise most hours of the day and the night, and again, 365 days a year. And the PAD designs that are pedestrian-friendly are strongly favored, but how can crossing a busy parking lot be considered pedestrian-friendly? These are just some of my points. I could go on, but for the interest of time, and because I think you guys get my point, I didn't move here to have a gas station in my backyard. This is not what I want. We're going to touch on a lot of points here, including our well. We're going to be touching upon like why we oppose the PAD as was submitted. But at the end of the day, we really do not want a gas station in our backyard. I don't want the noise. I don't want the light. I don't want the pollution. I don't want the fear of a possible contamination. I don't want that for my kids. So thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it very much.
Hi, I'm John Ficcaro. That's F as in Frank, I-C-A-R-O. I live at 5 Hamilton Lane in Weetog. I also am opposed to the proposed Cumberland Farms gas station at 155 Hopmeadow Street. My concern is that the proposal, and Tim Fitzgerald mentioned this, that the proposal lacks the required component of open space and public amenities. And just want to read, and I'm not going to read all your regulations, so just a couple of them. Subsection 5A of the PAD regulations entitled Master Development Plan General Requirements on pages 123 and 124. General requirement number 3 reads as follows. Open space and public amenities. Each proposed master development plan submitted under this article shall include areas of open space and public amenities in a design, form, location, and area to be approved by the Zoning Commission. And it goes on a little bit more, but I'm not going to go into all that. Subsection 6C of the PAD regulation sets forth the contents of a master development plan, and item number 8 includes the following description. Proposed open space, including a calculation of the area of the proposed open space, such as parks, lawn areas, and recreational facilities, and such proposed covenants or easements. So the issue on my end, and what you'll hear, is that this proposal does not include open space whatsoever. It's very surprising that there is, and it's really not surprising that there is no open space component in this proposal, because a small parcel means that virtually every square foot is needed to fit everything of that mixed use availability into that space. The idea of open space and public amenities within a gas station convenience store parking lot is a little bit bizarre, actually, which is why it's hardly mentioned in the applicant's narrative description. Also, at the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant indicated a willingness to consider adding a shelter for trail users. The idea is nice, really is, but given the crowded site plan, there appears to be no room for such an addition without creating more conflicts. The preservation and creative use of open areas is an important required factor in the PAD standards. But given the small parcel size, required 71 parking spaces, and these intense mixed uses, the connection to the bike trail is probably the best that can be done to satisfy the open space and public amenities requirement, but it is insufficient, in my mind, to justify a PAD zone change. So the regulation does require both open space and public amenities. It can't be seriously argued that this proposal with zero open space and a rather modest public amenity satisfies the letter and spirit of the open space and public amenity requirement for a PAD. And just for the record, my house was built in 1735. It actually was very close to the property here. It was moved in 1950. So don't let me make it, don't let me move it again, okay?
Good evening. For the record, I'm Steve Mitchell, resident of 165, but also a business owner, Mitchell Auto Group, which tonight is the second auto dealership in the state of Connecticut to go solar. So the first test was tonight. So Old Farms. Yeah. Been a resident of Simsbury all my life. I'm very proud to say that I'm also on the board of the bike committee in town here, and we're the first bicycle-friendly community in southern New England. And last week, if you noticed, we are the #1 town in the state of Connecticut for bike and pedestrian friendliness. Woohoo! I have lived next to a gas station, 150 feet away from a gas station. As John Keyes was here earlier, but it's really not that bad. There really wasn't an issue. My kids grew up and they're off and doing well. I'm not here to talk about the fear of the unknown or the 1 in a billion chance that something could happen, something could go wrong. That's part of life. It's actually refreshing to see a developer with some care and concern for the users of the rails and trails. The town of Simsbury doesn't really even have a good plan for women going to the bathroom along the rail trail. Our treasured jewel, the rails to trails. Ladies, support me on this one. There's nowhere to go to the bathroom. So
I won't ask about the men's.
No, we have our ways, but it is the #1 concern when you're going on the rail trail. I'm actually very disappointed in the lack of signage along the trail for public needs. There's none. So at least with what these guys are proposing tonight, I think they're trying to be considerate of trail users. And I think that this is going to be an issue. The town of Simsbury has 500 parking spaces. So there was an issue about people coming up there and crowding the lot with spaces. There does need to be some directional signage for trail parking. Go to Cheshire. It is a huge problem in Cheshire. Simsbury at least has Iron Horse Boulevard for parking. So I think it is very consistent. I've lived here. I've seen that place be a dump for a long time. I think, we've all seen it's just kind of an eyesore. So I think it's an appropriate use. I think that the consideration that the developer is talking about doing, it's not that bad. There's really, it's not going to create more traffic. It's going to create an opportunity for trail users and for people in the neighborhood to get some bread, some milk, some eggs, and they can use the rail trail to go there.
Noel Christensen, 272 Hopmeadow Street, Weetog. Chris, CHRISTENSEN. 272 Hopmeadow.
And it's N-O-W-E-L.
N-O-E-L. Lived in Simsbury, like Steve, all of my life. Been at 272 Hopmeadow Street 37 years. Used to be former Joni's Exxon. Town left me in the lurch. Exxon went away. Who came into the rescue? The gentleman over here. He fixed that place up. He tore out the dirty mess, the polluted dirt, everything that was left behind. and made it so it's, nicer than it was. The crime is down because he did it. It looks better because he did it. I agree with Steve Mitchell. This town is very important for bicycles today. Look at the mixed land use down at Simsmore Square. That seems to work beautifully. I'm sure a lot of people here shop there. There's a bicycle shop there. People bike a lot. I've just gotten into biking again. I had cancer twice, but I'm trying to live my life. And I've lived next to a gas station. I've had no problems. I agree. You can go on and worry about things. I worry more about GMOs in our food and the accident over in Japan. I wouldn't eat too many tuna fish if I were you. So we have bigger concerns in this world than putting in a mixed-use area down here that would be a benefit to the town. And I do understand your concern about your water. I'm not poo-pooing that by any means, but we've done a lot to preserve land in this town. My brother Nevin started because he went to college in the 60s up on the Cape. Look what they have on the Cape. Beautiful, preserved, miles and miles of beach. I'm sure a lot of people here go to the Cape. They still have gas stations on the Cape. Till we are all electric, and I applaud Steve for doing that, we're going to need cars and gasoline. Thank you.
Scott Gochin, Goetjen, 3 Basswood Lane, Weetog. 3 Basswood. I'm going to talk about the 400-foot text amendment, some of which was recently mentioned. Part of it is that it talks about that it will not adversely impact public health, safety, and welfare. It's very broad, vague language. You mentioned you could make it more restrictive, but as it reads right now, you put a gas station right next to a synagogue. To me, that comes under public welfare, and if you're very subjective, it's very subjective language, and you do that, where do you go from there in terms of future developments? Obviously, the reason for this was for this site application, but the way it's written has broad implications for the whole town. As was shown, there's really no need in the town right now for more gas stations. We have 9 or 10 gas stations, probably within 7 miles of the site. There's at least 3 gas stations within 2 miles of the site, and you showed it from up by the Pride Station, up by Kane's, up to the Exxon Mobil, down by Mitchell's, and then you have from base of Avon Mountain up to Bushy Hill. You have a number of gas stations, so there's really no need to amend the site as far as the whole town's concerned. Amend the text amendment. It's only going to take business away from other stations that are nearby. The town typically has been adverse to new gas stations. There were discussions, there was no applications, but there was discussions regarding Dorset Crossing. I think there was an application for near Old Meadow Plain and Route 10. Those never made it. There was an application and an actual discussion in the minutes for the one at Stop and Shop at Simsbury Commons, and that one they actually withdrew their application in the minutes of the meeting and to take that out of their application. Obviously, this amendment, as written, would cover the whole town, not just this site. You're taking the 400-foot buffer and you're essentially bringing it down to 0. Obviously, the text amendment is, right now you have a 400-foot buffer. You have no flexibility. You interject this to give the zoning commission some flexibility with regard to the buffer, but you're not going down to 200 feet or 300 feet with specific criteria to meet. You're going down to 0. So really, instead of giving you flexibility, you're taking that away because now you've set a precedence with a zero buffer next to one of the, next to a synagogue, which is one of the buffer sites. As was mentioned also, there's a double standard now. You'd be setting up one for people who are near a 400-foot buffer in a business zone versus a pad. So now you have two different areas. People might thought they were safe within a certain zone. If you put a pad on there, now they're not. So it will impact the whole town. They mentioned there was a applicant had a letter from the rabbi of the Chabad, the synagogue there. He said he wasn't. I also have a couple of letters, which I can pass out. One is from the Reverend of First Church in Simsbury. His reads, "I've read the changes proposed to the zoning regulations that would allow gas stations next to churches. I understand this is part of the application to build a gas station and convenience store on the Pool Barn property along Route 10. As a part of the Simsbury clergy, I call to question these proposed changes. The gas station and convenience store would compromise worship at the synagogue, which is why the zoning regulations are here in the first place. Additionally, this is a threat to all places of worship, and that the change would apply to the entire town. Unfortunately, changes like these are often made in the heat of the moment without thinking of the ramification for the short or long term. I request this letter be read aloud at the July 7th meeting and the proposed changes are considered. Sincerely, Reverend Kenneth Weichel." The second letter is from someone who couldn't be here tonight. It's from Gedalia Jeremias. It says, "Dear members of the board, as I'm unable to attend the meeting, I have asked a member of our group to read my prepared statement. My name is Gedalia Jeremias. Our family moved to Weetag about 2 years ago and currently lives at 1 Hamilton Lane. Over other towns, our initial interest in Weetag was that it was a quiet and safe place to raise our children. In addition, as we are Orthodox Jews and don't drive on the Sabbath, Hamilton Lane is in walking distance to the Chabad, located at 141 Hopmeadow Street and directly next door to the Pros Cumberland Farms gas station. We are opposed to this proposal on the table for a host of reasons. The first reason is because we live close to the proposed site, and the second reason is because we belong to the Chabad. Our opposition to the proposal based on living in close proximity to the site is for the reasons that our neighbors will have expressed tonight, namely safety, concern about drinking water, noise, maintaining character of our neighborhood, and the fact that we may not need yet another gas station in town, and preserving the small town feel of our surroundings. It is our second reason for moving to Weetag that I would like to spend a moment upon and ask for your patience. Although we do utilize a walking trail on the Sabbath, when we go to Chabad, there is a portion of our walk where we must walk along Hopmeadow Street. The Dunkin' Donuts has created a lot of traffic, and the Cumberland Farms gas station will create a tremendous amount of traffic and presents a safety concern as well. Furthermore, we attend Chabad in order to study scriptures and meditate. Building a Cumberland Farms gas station next door to the Chabad will create a severe distraction that might ruin our Jewish experience. As most gas stations play music over the loudspeakers, the idea of trying to study and meditate under such conditions would be seriously compromised. In addition, it is my feeling that the sale of beer and lottery tickets united with the general hangout mentality or mindset of that establishment like these draw would compromise our peaceful setting. As a rabbi, although not the rabbi of the Chabad, I am very familiar with the importance of and serenity and tranquility of when one is trying to have a spiritual experience. It is for this reason that I am opposed to the current proposal to build a Cumberland Farms gas station on this plot. I appreciate your effort on the behalf of our town and thank you for your time. Gedalia Jeremias." And so we do have, safety issues. Their Sabbath is on Saturday, which would be one of the peak times. And they walk, as do a number of other people do walk to that site for the Sabbath services. So I think with bringing the pad down to, the text amendment down to a 0 from 400 feet is not good for the town. And just to note that the Planning Commission also had a negative referral for this.
My name is Mike Downs. I live at D-O-W-N-S. I live at 72 Simsbury Manor Drive, Weetog. That would be geologically downstream from the site. Anyway, I grew up in Avon. I'm very familiar with this area. I've lived at my current location since 1981. So I'm a long-term resident of Simsbury. I'm very familiar with the traffic patterns. We heard the traffic study. One of the things the engineer mentioned was the traffic has actually decreased. In logical terms, I guess you could make the assumption that there would be less call for fuel on that alone. If the price point is right, you can also safely assume that every landscaper in the world is going to turn in there. Landscapers are not professional drivers. They'll be towing a 16-foot trailer. They'll make a turn in there, which means, as the engineer addressed, the curb cut is not wide enough. That trailer will end up on the lawn, which means that guy's going to stop, which means anyone in traffic will now be stopping. The other issue that the engineer didn't address when they were talking about the number of parking spaces is if we have a winter like we just had last winter, where does the snow go? How does that affect the line of sight going in both directions? When I looked at the original layout that was up here, from that point of view, the only place to put snow would be right in back where the walk path is, because obviously that entire lot's got to be cleared. Another thing that the engineer didn't talk about was the impact of the crosswalk. When that button is pressed, traffic stops. Dunkin' Donuts, anyone taking a left, traveling southbound, stops traffic. Anyone going north, turning into that site, if that button is pressed, if you're trying to take a left, you're stopping traffic again. I know that because I go there every day. I've gone there almost every day of my entire life, at least my adult life. As far as the restrooms for the walk path, I've got the walk path in my backyard. The walk path isn't used in the wintertime. There's very few footprints there. I know that because, again, it was a railroad going by. It was trains going by when I first bought my house. So I've seen every single step of the way going by there. So the restrooms, if that's an issue, you could put a porta potty in because it won't get used in the winter. As far as access to the walk path, that access also would be blocked in the winter with snow plowing. It's not going to happen. If the engineer wants to address how that works, I'd be glad to hear it. As far as the crosswalk button and the traffic flow goes, that would be interesting to hear. As far as the snow removal and lines of sight, that would be interesting to hear. Again, I live downstream, so to speak. There's an awful lot of wetlands in there. I had oil flowing through my yard from underground fuel storage from a neighbor. When that product comes into your yard, you own it as far as trying to sell your house. Not necessarily the person, where the causation was. While that's not my major concern, I just don't think it's an appropriate use of that land. Can you tell me where Hugh Blind Tower is? Yeah, it's right across from the gas station. Look, it's right up there. It's not a good fit at that location. Economically, it's a low-wage job. It'll be 10-10 at the best, right? And as you can see with the Dunkin' Donuts, it's not going to be local kids that are working there. That's not going to happen. I'm not in favor of it. It serves no purpose for the town. There's enough gas stations already. If we're all supposed to be going solar and wind, et cetera, why do you need another gas station? We got enough. I have never in my life, since I've lived in Simsbury, searched for fuel, except once. That was the October storm, but everything was closed everywhere. So you're not going to have a demand for the fuel. As the traffic study said, traffic is down. Traffic is not up. They did say that population is up, but traffic is down. Well, population doesn't utilize gas, traffic does. Again, well, that's about it. I won't take any more time.
Thank you.
Alan Needham, 2 Basswood Lane,
The spelling,
Needham.
and Alan is A-L.
A-N. Yeah. I'm an elected member of the Planning Commission, but certainly I'm not speaking for them tonight. I'm speaking for myself and my fellow neighbors. One comment I can't let stand is Mr. Evans' depiction of the rabbi as being 100% for this, because as luck would have it, I happened to see his informal before this commission in December of 2011, and I was pretty surprised at his comment that the rabbi was 100% for it. So I called him. So I said, "Hi, Rabbi," and I introduced myself, and we talked for a few minutes. He's a lovely man, a very sensitive, lovely man who is scared to death of secular issues. He doesn't want to be involved. So I said, "Gee, were you asked to sign a letter?" He says, "Yes, I was, but I don't want to be involved." And I said, "Then I can't get you to sign a letter for me either." And he goes, "No, I don't want to be involved." Then we had occasion to talk again. I'm not sure why that was, but I remember the third call was he called me. And he says, "I've been thinking about this." And this is as good a quote as I can remember. "I beg you, do not get me involved in this. We cannot be involved in this kind of thing." I don't know what that is, if it's part of his individual faith. As we've heard with a letter from Gedalia, it certainly isn't the congregation's point of view. But that particular man said, "I want to be left alone. I don't want to be involved." Well, now he is involved. The letter is dated 2011. His signature is at the bottom, and somebody has scrawled a date from a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how that happened. But to say that he's 100% for it, that's certainly not the conversation I had with him. PADs were promoted to us who had to vote for them as encouraging development that is creative, innovative, attractive. We were told, let's let developers show their creative juices by creating things that the underlying zone wouldn't allow. Let's hope for things that are really impressive, maybe even things that people drive here to see from other towns. That's what a PAD was supposed to do. It was supposed to give us things that were enhancing the town character, things we needed, things we could point at with pride. And what do we have here? A gas station. This PAD simply does not satisfy the requirements of a gas station, of a PAD. Section 1 says the PAD is meant to encourage attractive and innovative proposals, to create livable, environmentally wholesome, pedestrian-friendly projects. I don't hear anything about a gas station in that. Most towns restrict the location of gas station to avoid sensitive areas, just as we have, except somebody wants to stop that, a gas station. One concern when the PAD was initially proposed, when it was being pitched to all of us, those that were nervous about it complained that they were afraid it would be used inappropriately, that it would be used by people simply looking for a quick zone change, to build something that wouldn't otherwise be allowed. That's the case here. This is an application of cobbled together uses trying to sneak by as a legitimate PAD in order to build a gas station. PADs require open space. There is, as planning pointed out a couple of weeks ago, no real space here for human activity. It was said tonight that it's consistent with the POCD. Apparently planning didn't think so. They did not send you a positive referral. The 4 apartments would be part of a gas station and convenience store complex. There's several people in town, quite a few, it's mounting, that are concerned over the number of apartments being approved or in the pipeline for Simsbury. I did some math. If we count back a couple of years and go forward with things that are being discussed, things that have been approved, it could get up to 800,000 apartments. The people that are concerned about the number of apartments, I think, in part, are worried about who's going to live in them and what's it going to be like in 20, 30 years. What will those apartments be like? Will it change the character of our town? I think there'll be a very great cultural change if we have that big a percentage of our housing stock in apartments. If you're going to be worried about apartments, I think we ought to start with apartments next to a convenience store. Where do they have to go? Up? I don't think so. Who's going to live in a convenience store apartment? Across the street, they're having trouble filling an apartment building, and that's behind a Dunkin' Donuts. That's just not the kind of tenant that can pay the rent necessary to live in Simsbury. There is no requirement, of course, that the apartments be leased. I'm concerned that they may be built, but never used as apartments. Please note that there was not a positive referral from planning on either the PAD or the text amendment. A word on traffic. I was interested in the comments about the bike path. I think we're thinking about the wrong part of the bike path. How about the bike path crossing? That is the most confusing, dangerous intersection in town. When you live in that area, every once in a while you hear the squeal of brakes. Made worse, by the way, lately because the police have taken to parking there to try and regulate the traffic. When people cross, there's a button to push, but the sign is this big, so they don't see the sign. So you drive up, you see somebody waiting to cross the road, they don't push the button, either because they don't want to bother you or they don't know to push the button. So you're slowing down in your car. Do I stop? Do I go? Does he have the right of way? Nobody knows how it works. Do you only stop when the yellow lights are on? And you don't see the yellow lights until you're on top of them. My point is, it's a dangerous, confusing intersection. And when you add about 4,400 cars a day during the week, and about over 60, according to their study, over 6,500 cars a day on weekends, that situation will not get better. It won't get better for our friend Gedalia as he walks to shul on Saturday. If you add that much traffic, you're literally talking about an increase on Route 10 of 30 to 40% from a 2-acre site. Now, we're talking about having the Hartford be redeveloped. We're talking about the Southern Gateway. This is not part of the Southern Gateway, by the way. We're talking about adding all kinds of something, commercial, retail, housing. We're also talking about the fact that this town is committed to a 2-lane Route 10. That's what we did when we did the Route 10 corridor study. We're committed to a 2-lane Route 10, maybe with some turn lanes. What that means is you can only have so many cars on Route 10 and keep it as 2 lanes. So the traffic has to be allocated amongst the various developments. If you're going to give away 6,000 cars on this little 2-acre site, how much more is left for the stuff that really matters, the grander scale things across the street? Besides the inappropriate text amendment and the other things you've heard today, there is an additional very clear reason to vote no on this application. I've read it, reread it, shown it to people, have them read it, and everybody I've showed it to agrees that the PAD regulations, Section 3, clearly and unequivocally says that a PAD over an I-1 zone requires a minimum of 10 acres. This site has 1.87 acres. There's no waiver allowed. There's no contradiction elsewhere in the document. That's what it says. And if that's what it says, that's what you have to do, because that's why we have regulations, to be followed. The irony is, you wrote them. You voted for them. Now you've got to enforce them. Zoning regulations should never permit a gasoline tanker to unload its cargo just a few car lengths away from sensitive areas such as churches. The protection has existed in our regulation for decades. there needs to be a minimum buffer whether or not the application is a PAD. Planning unanimously voted no on the text amendment referral and would have removed this protection from the PAD. I urge a no vote on the text amendment. Planning also did not support the PAD referral. There are many reasons, but the most compelling reason is simply that the regulations can't let them do this on 2 acres. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's 10:15. Is there anybody else who'd like to say something that hasn't been said?
Good evening. My name is John Olson. That's spelled Jon Olson. I live at 109 Hopmeadow Street, and my property is not only bordering Hopmeadow Street, but it borders the bicycle trail right behind Bidwell's. And I think it is appropriate to talk about the wells. You should not forget the general wetlands area. My property has standing water in it often. I think that the probability of contamination of the well is one of the factors. The other factor to consider is the catastrophic nature of contamination. I want to emphasize that term. I'm an epidemiologist, by the way. I use the trail every day because I walk from my home to take a commuter bus. So I go on the trail. I try to use it in the winter also. If the snow is not more than a foot deep, I am on that trail. And therefore, I would be aware of the smells and anything else produced. I wanted to also mention, we talked about cleanup of sites. I'm always reminded of the Dunkin' Donuts because of plastic food containers with the Dunkin' Donuts label, which appears either on my property or it appears on the bicycle path. It detracts from the quality of the site. And I agree with the other people who spoke in opposition. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not going to ask again. I really appreciate everybody's contribution and feedback. We have a decision to make as it relates to the public hearing. Can we leave it open? Yes, Bob? Yeah, please.
Another attorney? Section, you have a planning commission and a zoning commission, and there's a statute which has to be followed when you refer a zone change or text amendment to a planning commission. And it says, I won't read all of it, they owe you a report which has to be read into the minutes of your public hearing. They meet tomorrow night. I've read the minutes of the Planning Commission, and they need to make a change to reflect the vote on the second of the referrals. It was a negative referral, as was the first. The first referral was, as has been mentioned, was 4-0 against the distance requirement, text amendment. They need to make a change to the minutes on the second referral to clarify it. And their report, to the extent they have a separate report, needs to be read into the record of your public hearing, which can't happen tonight.
Got it. Okay. That answers my question.
There you go.
Very much.
Yeah. Last
Hiram.
thing, Mr. Chairman, is I do have, and needs to be read into the record tonight, report from the Capital Region Council of Governments. The comment from the CROG is that the staff of the Regional Planning Commission of the Capital Region Council of Governments has reviewed this referral and finds no apparent conflict with the regional plans or the policies or concerns of the neighboring towns. So that letter's part of the record as well. Needs to be read for the record.
We had some other correspondence that was submitted. I think we'll just stipulate that that can be added to the record. Mr. Ritson's letter, Ms. Danielson's letter, which was received. I think there were a couple of others that were received, so we'll be sure that they're put on the record. So I think what we will obviously do is leave the public hearing open, which means that this will be continued on July 21st, same time, same place.
Do we need an extension from
No, we're fine.
We got time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're fine. We will not need a recap of the presentation, as much as I would look forward to it. No, I'm just kidding. Just being funny. Really appreciate the detail that went into this. And just so everyone knows, at that point, we will take additional comments, but only to the extent I think that they're additive or substantive to what we've done. We might give you an opportunity to just comment on any questions that were raised that you felt were unanswered. But we're really not looking for a full rebuttal. We understand that everybody here has their own opinion about what's going on. And at that point, we'll close the hearing if appropriate, and we will discuss and work on the merits. We may have some questions that we will bring back to you 2 weeks hence, but appreciate all of the thoughtful preparation that went into both participants and the presenter applicant today. All right.
Mr. Chairman, if any commissioners have any other questions in the meantime that they would like to have researched or answered, please let me know, and I'll make sure I get those to the applicant.
Right.
Happy to put those in the file.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't believe that we had anything else on our agenda tonight. All in favor, say aye.
This is my friend. This is